Can you close the door at the top of the stairs, honey? I'm going live again. We're back, guys. Take two. This time it says excellent connection, which is a good sign. Is anybody going to come back? That's the real question. Did I scare everybody off? Everybody unsubscribing? Oh, we got one person that came back at least. Or maybe they're a brand new viewer. Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. I think, I think I've resolved it now. So, hopefully it's smooth sailing from here. But no promises. Clearly this is not 100% in my control, much as I would like it to be. So nobody's joining back on yet. That's very strange. That makes me a little bit worried that something strange is going on. Oh, maybe that's why. Maybe it's because it's privacy unlisted. Okay, I think we're back. Is anybody going to come back in the chat? Did I scare you guys off for good? Two concurrents coming back. Sorry, guys. I'm embarrassed. Both cams work. Yeah, I think I figured it out. I think it had to do with the ports that I was using on my computer. Not all USB ports are created equal, and that's been causing problems with this camera, I think. It's ironic to me that the first time I ever streamed, things went perfectly smoothly, and everything since is varying degrees of disaster. And it almost seems like it gets worse every time. But you know what? I'm just gonna do what's fashionable these days, and I'm gonna blame Games Workshop. They're trying to hold me down. They're trying to hold down creators, guys. Games Workshop hacked my system, and it must be their fault. Are we smooth? Are we still smooth sailing? Anyways, guys, let's get right back into what we were here to do, which was to go through some White Dwarf magazines and to come up with some inspiration. And if we have some more technical difficulties, I'll just smash my computer to bits, and we'll turn this into like a mailing list or something. Because technology can only push a man so far. Let me just put it that way. Okay, temperature looks okay. We have a question, what year are your White Dwarf magazines from? Well, that's a good question, because it doesn't say, as I was saying last time, before we got cut off, it doesn't say what year they're from. So here we have October, but it doesn't say which year October. I'm going to guess this is 99 or 98, 97. So it says in here in the copyrights and trademarks section, 97. Okay. Somebody's trying to call me. That's not something I expected. There's always something, right, guys? There's always something. The thing is, nobody has my phone number except my wife, and I know she's upstairs and she wouldn't try to call me during a stream. So it's definitely either one of two things. It's definitely an automated message that's speaking Mandarin that could be saying anything in the world, or it's somebody telling me that my car's warranty is about to expire, so I need to send them a $500 prepaid gift card to Best Buy or something to make sure my warranty doesn't expire. Scam calls, you know. So, anyways. Josh says, yeah, I recently ordered a 1998 copy that has the only Praetorian's battle report in it, Halcyon Days. Is that the one, the battle at something Creek, Glazer's Creek, with the orcs? I was actually just talking about that with Bill Makes Things. Bill Makes Stuff. Bill Making Stuff. Oh my gosh, he's going to kill me if he hears me mispronounce that one more time. There he is. He's in the chat asking if I've been in a car accident. And no, I haven't been in a car accident. I've been up really late editing, so I'm running on very little sleep, guys, but I'm feeling good. I've had coffee. I went to a diner with my wife today, and that was pretty nice. So now we're in the zone. We're going through some old White Dwarfs. Does it look like I've been in a car accident? My normal... What did you mean by that, Bill? Anyways, first things first here, we can see we've got some old dwarfs. I think these are the Colin Dixon dwarfs. Colin Dixon is, in my opinion, the preeminent dwarf sculptor, but these could also be Perry's because they had a very similar style. But that stuff I really like. And then we also see here, I find this really interesting. There's several eras of orcs. There's the Brian Nelson orcs, which are kind of the new style that have dominated Games Workshop since basically the late 90s, and until basically the newest Age of Sigmar box set is the first time that we haven't had Brian Nelson orcs from Games Workshop in a really long time. But before that, there were the Kev Adams orcs, which are the ones that sort of have that classic lantern jaw. But these are something different. These are an in-between that was only came out in Gorka Morka. And I don't know what to call these kind of orcs. So if anybody knows what a good term for this era of orcs, I'd love to hear it. Sam says, just in time for an orc history lesson. Excellent. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that. I think this would be called a Kev Adams orc. These are Undead Graveguard from the edition right before the ones that I want to collect. Games Workshop used to do this weird thing, and I think this is really funny because it's a professional miniatures company. But let's zoom in right here. You can see, like, look at the skull on this guy here. It looks like he's wearing a pair of goggles. Now this could actually be, now that I think about it, this could be sort of a Saxon-style helmet that the sculptor intended, and the painter just thought that was part of the skull. But that's a very, very anatomically correct skull, if that is not supposed to be a visor on there. And so these sculpts really show their age, in my opinion. But stuff like this, you can't get better dwarfs than these. Like these monopose, full of character, ruddy-cheeked dwarves. That's what dwarves are supposed to look like, if you ask me. The Fraterus Militia. I really like these models. In my opinion, there are not enough just citizen models, just normal people in the world. And if you've heard me talk about this before, you know how I feel that citizens should essentially be... you need citizens to make the more fantastic elements of a universe pop. Because the contrast between normal and fantastic highlights the fantastic. And if everything's fantastic, then you're just kind of adrift in a dream world where nothing matters. Like, Josh says, yeah, Glazer's Creek, that's the one. The issue has loads of Gorka Morka stuff. There's a whole page where you could order the armies from battle reports too. I might have that one around here somewhere. I was looking for it the other day for Bill and I couldn't find it, but we'll see. But we're going to go through a couple here. So I would love to see more militia models, more human models, even unarmed NPCs. I would love to see that. I know there's a huge focus on war. I mean, it's wargaming after all, but I really like unarmed models. The old High Elves, I can take them or leave them, if I'm honest, but I do like this old school blue to white gradient. I think that makes models look really good. This, I always enjoy looking at these. These are like the tournaments. This is, and for those of you, this might be, those of you in the UK, you probably get different pages like this. Like this is Campbell, California. They had a tournament. But I like seeing the terrain that they're using in the tournament. Like I can tell right away looking at this, that this piece of terrain down here is made from the lid of a spray paint. The lid of a spray paint can, because I've actually done something similar to that. And it's funny because I've never seen that before. And something that I thought was an original idea, here it is in White Dwarf 20 years ago. Nothing new under the sun, I suppose. Look at that. Full page spread, Gorka Morka. This sort of stuff, I love this stuff. If you look at, contrastingly, the modern illustrations that Games Workshop goes in for, the modern style, like, for example, this one here, okay? This is Necromunda rulebook, the Book of Judgment. And you can see it's far more anatomically correct. The proportions are much better, but it's much less rendered. Like everything's just sort of painterly, sort of done in almost an impressionistic style, and it makes it feel loose and much more like a sketch. Whereas something like this is exquisitely rendered. I mean, like there are some issues with this picture from a realism standpoint. Specifically, like the foreshortening on this guy's arm, the way his arm is pointed at the camera, is a little bit awkward. But the fact is, it's a painting. Like this is probably a painting done on illustration board. And if you look into the background here, like there's so much detail just rendered exquisitely in the back. Like look at these guys. There's probably 30 orcs in this picture if you look into all the detail. And this is the way all the illustrations used to be done. They would commission an artist to make a real piece of art that's probably hanging on somebody's wall somewhere, and the guy would get out a brush and his gouache paints or whatever kind of paints he's using, and he would do it and sometimes even retain the rights to the original painting. And I miss that. I think that's one thing they could go back to. Like, first of all, nowadays there's so many people who are into this hobby that the originals of a painting like this would be worth a ton. And so I think you'd be able to attract some really good artists if they went back to this. And I also just, like as a kid, I used to look at the illustrations on the cover of the box sets and just constantly find more details. And you can't do that these days because the box sets are sort of more painterly. There's just blur in the background these days. And I'm not going to say that's a nitpick, more as just like a preference thing on my part. Here's two fellas enjoying a nice game of Gorka Morka. Isn't that funny? This actually looks quite a lot like the gate that I just did in my most recent Chaos video. Of course, this is an orc gate. If you guys haven't seen that video, go ahead and check that out. It's a Chaos Fortress I just made. But you can see there's like, the mouth as a gate thing is something I think is really cool. And it's actually, like in the Game of Thrones novels, there's a really cool scene where they go through a gate that sort of opens like a mouth. I've always enjoyed that. Plaid PVC Pipe says, I always figured the human militia or rebels would be great. They'd be great multi-purpose stuff. They could be rebels or militia or anything else. It'd be a lot of fun. I agree. I think something like that would sell really well. Like people, for almost every army, you could do that. Like anybody who has a Stormhawk or, sorry, not a Stormhawk, a Storm Talon gunship or a Thunderhawk, wouldn't you like to have like a few models of guys, guys who just belong sort of on the landing pad or runway with like crates and clipboards and stuff like that? Maybe not clipboards, but just the sort of people milling around the army just makes it feel a lot more, I don't know, a lot more interesting. Something like that for Necromunda would definitely sell. Portello asks, which White Dwarf was your first 268 here? I don't actually know, Portello. How bad's that glare, guys? Let me see if I can do something about the glare. Is that better? It's not better for lighting my face, but it's better for the magazine probably. Or maybe it isn't. What a handsome starter set that is, eh? It's always funny to me, when I was a kid, looking at these magazines, these guys look like grown men, and now that looks like a kid to me. It just shows. Time makes ruins of us all. Some beautiful conversion guides. Now, this is just a painting guide. But this sort of overexposed flash photography style of hobby blog quality stuff in these magazines just has a dear place in my heart. Here we go, guys. Here's the start of what I was talking about, Brian Nelson orcs. You can see these guys with their big faces, the exaggerated musculature, that extreme V taper, and the hulking upper bodies, even more so than these guys down here. These are kind of the first models in that Brian Nelson style I was talking about. And I would actually love to pick up these two models, but I can't see them anywhere. So if anyone has an extra one lying around and want to sell it to your boy, well, shoot me a DM, because I'd appreciate that. Nikita L asks, didn't they do some of the hanger-ons for the new Necromunda? A cook and an ammo jack, if I recall correctly. I think you're right, Nikita. I think that those were Forge World resin models, though. And they're like, they're in pretty dynamic poses. They're pretty expensive. And the scale is actually a little bit bigger than, I think, some of the other Necromunda models. So that doesn't tick that box for me in terms of how useful it would be to have a multi-purpose kit of civilians that you can put into a bunch of different spaces. Like, they constantly tell us, hive cities are full of untold billions of people, and then every time these gangs clash, nobody's around. But I have something like that I'm working on that I think you guys would be excited to see. Kelvin Forster said, just tuned in, OMF. I had this mag, I'm pretty sure it came with some free terrain. Like, I assume it would be some of this card cutting terrain. It says, yeah, free counters and 3D tabletop barricades. That's pretty cool. I really like this stuff. It would be really fun to go back with Crycut or some sort of other laser cutter and cut these with the relief that they were intended to suggest in the first place, like these little arches and stuff. There's a guy on Instagram called 40K Ham Slams who does some stuff like that. The Crycut machine. Crycut? Anyways, it's good stuff. Yeah, here, this is exactly what I'm talking about, guys. You can see the transition here from the Kev Adams orc, which is like this guy here, with these funny little guys like this, with that sort of round, cylindrical, like pillbox jaw, to the Brian Nelson orcs. You see it happening in real time in this Gorka Morka issue here. Like, this guy could be released today and nobody would bat an eyelid. Like, it's just such a timeless, beautiful sculpts these things were. Whereas some of these guys haven't aged so well. These weird Gorka Morka era orcs. But that looks like a conversion even to me. That's how weird it looks to my eye. Ryan Matthews says, gutted. My mom threw out my Gorka Morka years ago. I was really lucky as a kid because my dad had a traumatic experience where I think he went away for the summer when he was 13 or something, and he came back and his mom had thrown out his model train set. So my parents were always sensitive about not throwing out my toys without asking me, and I was really blessed in that respect. And that's all because my dad had to go through it, so I feel for you. I feel for you. Nikita L. Yeah, Necromunda really lacked the teeming masses of humanity department. And yes, there's probably worse Citadel models like the Squat Merc, although all of the new NM models are bigger. Yeah, you know, I played the Delac gang, and I like the new Delac models. Like the aesthetic of them is cool, but they're so tall that I haven't picked up a box yet because I just don't really know what to do with them. This is fun. Here's today's first fun fact of the day. This sort of helmet, which we sometimes associate with a Viking helmet, Vikings did not wear helmets with horns. That is a that is a trope that was invented by a costume designer for a Wagner opera who wanted to show the sinister nature of one of the Viking characters and also show that he was the leader. And so he gave him devil's horns on his helmet. And there are no historical examples of a Viking wearing a horned helmet. So that is a modern trope. But it sure looks cool, doesn't it? But imagine this in a fight, you know, some guy's sword clips one of these long horns and sprains your neck, and next thing you know, you're flopping on the ground, and game over. So, but they sure look cool. They sure look cool. This is fun. This is showing you here how to do uh, convert your trucks to make some roll bars and stuff with some brass rod. This is the sort of stuff that I just love seeing. Like this model tank collectors are really good at doing this sort of stuff. Is adding extra armor plates with plasticard. That's one thing I've never really gotten too into is customizing vehicles and stuff like that. And I think I come from a Warhammer Fantasy background where that was always secondary, but I've always really liked that. And it's funny, like for those of you who didn't play in this era, these trucks are really small. I thought it was just on the shelf there, but I have one of the tracks at least. And you can see it's like, I mean, I'm not like it's the size of a matchbox. And everything has gotten bigger over the years. But this is like the size of a deck of cards. Like that's pretty much life size, which is very strange for a vehicle in the modern concept, but I still think they're lovely models. Woo1 says, hey, Heart. Hey, Woo1, welcome to the stream. Brendan Sparrow says, I do love those dorky Kev Adams orcs, though. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people really like them. They have a soft spot in a lot of people's heads, and they're full of character, that's for sure. And I think it's telling that they're trying to take so many of those notes of character and design into the new orcs, like especially those, what do they call, the snakebite orcs? Beast Snagas. A lot of them are direct tributes to old Kev Adams orcs, which is kind of fun to see. Epic 40K. See, this stuff never appealed to me when I was a kid, and I'll tell you guys why. A little traumatizing story. I went on eBay when I was a kid, and you know, I didn't have like a ton of money for hobbies, and I saw that they were selling Scorches, and I collected a few orcs at the time, and I was thinking I was going to get something this size. I found this auction for Scorches, and they showed up, and it was these. It was Epic Scorches, and I was so disappointed when they came in the mail. And they're, you know, they're literally that big. I've never gotten over it, so that soured me on Epic altogether. But now that, you know, I'm a little bit removed from that traumatic incident, I look at this and I think this is just awesome. I especially like, from a terrain perspective, how you can get real cliffs and undulating hills, and that's probably only about, you know, well, this is life size. So you can have a really super terrain heavy battlefield, which is actually pretty inspiring to me. I'm going to take some notes about that. Let me know in the chat. Would you guys be upset to see me delve into some smaller scale, or would you think that would be cool? Because I've been thinking about that at different times. You know what would be especially cool? Because nature has a way of having sort of a fractal symmetry to it. And I wonder if there would be a way to do terrain that works at different scales, like an entire tabletop, because that could be fun. The Mechanical Gamer says 10 millimeters is the only scale I enjoy. Oh, I can enjoy Titans. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that would be the size of a toddler in real life. Is this the one that Midwinter Minis just bought? I don't know Titans very well, guys. I'm trying to keep the glare down. What if I do this? Oh, that's weird. The Mechanical Gamer says, what issue is this? It's giving me crazy nostalgia. This is White Dwarf number 213 from 1997. And again, here, guys, this is another example of a beautiful illustration from yesteryear. And this is a John Blanche, if I'm not mistaken. It's got his style. I won't spend too much time on it because it's not a big enough image for us to really look at all the details. But you can tell how many figures he's rendered in there. And it's not, you know, photorealistic, but it doesn't have to be. This is the sort of thing that I could stare at for hours and enjoy every moment of. Ooh, here we go. This is some beautiful Raven Wing bikers against some Night Lords. As you guys may know, I really like Night Lords. Night Lords are my Chaos Army. And this guy here is probably the reason why I chose to play Night Lords. I remember always thinking, you know, I wasn't too into 40k when I was a kid. I was into the fantasy side of things, but I always remember thinking this guy was pretty awesome. And this is a divisive model. Some people hate him, some people love him. I love him. Again, we've got another John Blanche illustration over here. John Blanche is also kind of divisive. I mean, not really among hardcore gamers who love him, but some people look at his drawings and they go, I mean, that's nothing special. But it's the concepts that he packs into here. Like there's just so many ideas that a sculptor could take from, like this key ring here, the design of the sword, the layers of purity seals. Really a master. I would love to have a John Blanche artwork at some point. Look at this terrain. Fun, accessible looking bunkers, scratch built. Some of this stuff looks a little bit haggard. Like I don't like these bristly bits very much. But and you know, these are the old Citadel trees they used to sell. They don't sell any trees with foliage anymore, do they? They just sell those ones with the plastic canopy. But it sure looks good as a whole when you look at the page. This looks inviting to me in a way that the modern stuff does not. Look at these rocks up here. I really like this. This is probably just done with a hot wire foam cutter and some pieces of XPS. This is a type of project that would probably take an afternoon, to be honest. Maybe I should do a video like that, just showing how you can do some of this more simple terrain really quickly. I think people might like that. The Mechanical Gamer says, I used to love the issues where they'd show off some Necromunda terrain, get a load of great ideas from there. I'm with you, man. Hopefully there's some in here. Nair says, what does your Night Lord's army look like? Well, you can see some shots of it arrayed in the Monster Bash video that I did in, what was that, February? And there's some of it in the Chaos Fortress video that I posted today, so you can go check that one out as well. Here's showing you how to assemble the free terrain that came in the magazine. Now, realistically, guys, Games Workshop, I mean, there's obviously a strong nostalgia bias to old stuff, but the new Games Workshop terrain just blows this stuff out of the water. It's not even close. Like, something like this is like literally 3 or 4 orders of magnitude better than these. And this may not come free in the magazines, but I mean, you got to give credit where credit is due. Games Workshop terrain is absolutely gorgeous. I don't feature a lot of it on my channel because I do a lot of scratch building stuff and I want everybody to know that there's lots of alternatives and stuff, but I will be incorporating some of that stuff in future projects just because I do really appreciate it and it's a lot of fun. Here's some of that Necromunda style terrain that you were talking about, Mechanical Gamer. That is one thing that's really, really handy about the card terrain is it folds up really small. So you can actually keep it in the box. Like I had in my Necromunda group, there was a guy who would show up with his army in the box, in the original box. He had like about, I don't know, his gang was huge. He had like 30 Orlocks. And then he also had 2 full sets of the old Necromunda terrain and the bulkheads and what's the expansion? The Outlanders expansion. And so we would add that to the terrain at the club and make some really great hive cities, and that was a ton of fun. So that's a huge advantage. It's just the portability of it, and that can't be understated. Woo! Look at this beauty. This is an Imperial landing pad. Look at that. That is absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so if I angle it like this, then we get less glare. Let me do a little setup. I'm just going to use some insulation foam to make a little angle table for you guys. How's that? Better glare? I think that's better. We're going with it anyways. This is a really stellar piece of terrain. I should look at this stuff more often because this is really, really cool. I in particular like how they've incorporated some natural elements to give more height to the structures. That's really, really cool. Really, really cool. And you can see over here, there's that old Land Raider. You can see over here how they've suggested, like you can actually see this is probably foam board. Like they haven't really even bothered to hide the seam, but they've suggested some internal structure, some rebar, which is a really good, clever technique. Well, what are these guys? I don't actually recognize these guys. Someone tell me in the chat what these are. Are these just like Dark Angels Terminators of some kind? They almost look like Proto-Custodies. Because these are the Dark Angels Terminators that I recognize. So what are these? What are these? They really do look like Proto-Custodies to me. And this is always fun. When you have little platforms throughout the terrain, so you can accommodate skirmishers scampering through. Twisted Razor says Grey Knights. Oh, those are old Grey Knights. Oh, interesting. That's very cool. I did not realize. Of course they are. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Jonathan Barnhart says the original Necromunda bulkhead terrain is still the best modular terrain ever created. You could be right about that. You know, you can actually see... Oh no, these aren't Necromunda bulkheads. They're just a similar style. But I really do like the support brace look that they give. Plaid PVC Pipe says they are Deathwing Knights. Oh, so they're not Grey Knights. They're not Grey Knights. They're alternate version of Dark Angels Knights. Well, thank you, Plaid PVC Pipe, for clearing that out. Clearing that up. They don't have hoods, though, just so we're clear. They might have a suggestion of a psychic hood, but they're not wearing cloth hoods. They have sort of like almost like a Goldie mask. I'm not sure how clear that quality is for you guys. Some people are saying Grey Knights. Some people are saying Deathwing Knights. One of those mysteries better left unsolved. Martin Coleman says, no, they are Grey Knights. Okay, okay. Ooh, look at that, guys. This is the type of color that you just don't see anymore. For some reason, they changed. Like, look at this. Look, this is the color Blood Angels used to be, which was blood red. This is the old Citadel blood red that came in the pot with the white lid. Now, if you look at the Blood Angels now, the way they're colored, they've dumbed down the color of the Blood Angels quite a lot. They changed it to Mephiston red which is this color here. And you can see it's a much deeper red. It doesn't have that vibrancy that it used to once have. And I've heard rumors that around Games Workshop, the heavy metal team used to do a little something where they would, and maybe we'll spot that in this issue, but you could see on their desks they would use artist inks and just glaze and glaze and glaze the most vibrant saturated colors to get these sort of insanely bright hues. These trees back here, I really like these. These actually featured in one of the dioramas, or one of the tabletop setups that got me interested in the hobby in the first place, which was Lizardmen versus Bretonia in the flyer that they used to give out for free at Games Workshop. And I like these. They're alien, they're jungly looking, but at their core, they're just sort of a saguaro cactus shaped wire armature with some bits of foliage put on there. So that's really interesting to me. I'm going to make a note of that. And you can see they used to, back in the day, they used to texture everything with like texture paste that was just PVA glue and sand. And so everything has this coarse, grainy texture on it. Like everything's covered in sand in this era, which is kind of charming, but it's not the most realistic thing. And then here are some of those Necromunda bulkheads that people were talking about. And these are beautiful. Yeah, look at these Tyranids. You never see a hive fleet that's this vibrant anymore. I mean, people still choose the wacky combinations, but you don't get this saturation. Like this, the way this just jumps out of the page at you. I love it. Also, can I just point out, I've seen a lot of conversions of this particular Blood Angels captain or sergeant, but people often forget that yes, that is, in fact, a tactical mullet right there. That white wisp, that's his hair. So if you're going to convert this guy, don't forget the tactical mullet. Thank you very much. Scabim's in the chat. Hello, everybody. Hello, Scabim. Welcome. Kyle Seeley says, those are very tomato red. Yeah, they are, you know, and I think some people, like these hyper-saturated paints that didn't have the greatest coverage were very hard to paint with for beginners. Using that Citadel undercoat, I don't know if you guys remember, but the old white primer used to like fill in all the details if you did it badly, and of course every kid did it badly. And then these bright saturated colors made for some pretty hideous models, so I think that might go into the rationale of why they've changed the paints and the color scheme. But yeah, this is not specifically Necromunda terrain, but these are the Necromunda bulkhead pieces, and you can see they're tremendously versatile for making all kinds of shapes. And this might actually be disassemblable too, although of course you can glue it if you want to put it on a base like these guys have here. All right, we got a golden demon, guys. I'm especially excited for you guys who are in the UK. Even if you remember this, you might not remember. Like, even if you remember this issue, you might have had different regional sections like this, which is the stars and bars. And this one, I actually remember this, because these are Primarchs. This is before I think it was canon that the Primarchs are larger than human size. And this is really fun for me to see. Like, these are old school mini Marines. Like, this guy, I think, is based on the Dante model. And it's like, it's teeny tiny. So to think of Sanguinius as being a, you know, a little shrimp like that is very amusing to me. We got Lehman Russ. We got Rogel Dorn. We got Jugtay Khan. We got the Lion himself, Lionel Johnson. And of course, the golden boy, Sanguinius. This is too fun. And look at this. This guy's ahead of his time, this sort of grimdark doll skull thing. Very fun. Also, can I just point out that this is the type of paint job, you know, I don't want to take anything away from Stephen Smith for his wonderful work here. But if this were posted on Instagram today, it would get like 15 likes. This is not Golden Demon quality today. And that's really interesting to me, how quickly the hobby has leveled up in like to stratospheric proportions. Like the high-level paint jobs you see these days, just ubiquitously, it's just mind-blowing. Although, you know, if he painted this banner, people would like this. I shouldn't say this would get 15 likes, because it would obviously, first of all, they would take a better picture of it today, because everybody's got a good camera on their smartphone for the most part. But yeah. This is the sort of conversion you used to see all the time, and you can still see this on eBay. Where people used to convert their Chaos vehicles and absolutely just put everything under the sun with them. 6 dead bodies and 5 nails, a couple lengths of chain, a few blobs of green stuff. This is a classic right here. And this won 3rd place in Golden Demon. Times have changed, eh? Times have changed. And look at this. Just 2 Dark Angels together is a Golden Demon runner-up in 1998. I mean, they're pretty nicely painted. Like this has a sort of a directional light, really nice gradients, but still, this would not do so well today. I'll tell you that much. This is really interesting over here. Look at this. This guy's like hand sculpted a Dark Angel chaplain. I don't know what scale that is. It says it's out of wax. It stands over a foot tall. And they just featured him. They just featured him in here as a, hey man, that's cool. Keep up the good work. I'm not sure they would do that these days. But this looks ahead of its time just because of the proportions. I get a kick out of that. Best single miniature, Victor Hardy. I remember Victor Hardy's work. I remember he did a Bloodthirster one year. Jonathan Barnhart. Well, gotta go get ready for work. Later, taters. Later, Jonathan. Plaid PVC Pipe said, actually, that type of diorama would totally be able to win today if it was painted really, really well. Yeah, I think you mean this one here, the Rocco Mazzella Dark Angels. I think you're right. I think you're right. It would just have to be like this. You can tell that they dry brush the rocks and stuff. Like this is not what would win a Golden Demon today. But I do think you're right. Simplicity doesn't go out of style. Oops. Former Crow says, I really like how it suggests the world around it with very little detail. I'll agree with that. I think it is a nice sort of restrained choice. This is when they used to list the retailers. This is fun. You can see in Toronto, Century Models and Hobbies, rest in peace. That was a great store that I used to love as a kid. And the Silver Snail too. F's in the chat for all the fallen hobby stores, guys. Let's get those F's in the chat. Pay respects, please. Here's the old Ultramarines. This is a more pleasing shade of blue to my mind. That's all I have to say about that. I think they look really nice with lots of yellow and red notes on them. Not nice enough for me personally to collect, but nice. Here we go. This is what I'm talking about. This is the type of battle that I've always wanted to have. You know, what is this, 8 foot by 8 foot square? This is how I remember Games Workshop as a kid. There were always kids in there. They were running demo games. They were getting you excited. They had all this cool terrain. That was good times. By the way, guys, I think I've mentioned this before, but when I was a kid, I used to go to the Games Workshop in the Toronto Eaton Centre, and the guy who used to run the demo games sometimes was Ash from Guerrilla Miniature Games. And so I really got a kick out of seeing that he had a YouTube channel when I came back to the hobby a couple years ago. Very cool stuff. He probably ran me through a game when I was a little kid, which I'm sure he remembers. Retail position openings. You can get one of these handsome red polos, guys. Do we have any former GW employees? This is too funny. That looks just like my friend. One of my friends. I'm not going to say his name or anything, but that looks a lot like him. And this is Thomas Piernan. This is the creator of Mordheim, or maybe not the creator, but he wrote the rules, and he's still really involved in the community. And you can interact with him a little bit if you're in the Mordheim group on Facebook, because he's still involved in the community. Cool guy. Cool guy. He's writing about high elves here. I love this sort of paint job. Just the highlights on those wings. That's the sort of stuff that I would just get intimidated by as a kid. Because when you don't know how to thin your paints and don't know how to take care of your brushes, that sort of thing is just beyond daunting. Like I remember painting some swooping hawks for one of my buddies one time and just having the hardest time just doing alternating white and black feathers. And so the idea of highlighting each feather after that, I would grow old and gray before that. Mechanical Gamer says, I used to go to the one in Cardiff, Wales. They nicknamed me Squig and would shout Squig when I walked through the door on games day. Isn't that a fun memory? Isn't that a fun memory? You know, one of the best experiences... Ooh, look at this. Look at this. We have the Underhive Gangs of Necromunda. I love all these old models. I have these. I have these. I have her, who's a great Juve for, and I have this kid, and this guy. But oh, I also have one of these Goliath Juves. But some of these have aged better than others. Like I think the new Van Sar knocked these old Van Sar out of the park, but I don't think you can beat the old Delax. And I don't think you can beat the old Cawdor either. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, I was going to say, I had the best experience at Games Workshop ever when I was a kid. My mom was taking my brothers and I to Games Workshop, and I guess we looked up the wrong address and ended up going to the Canada headquarters in Mississauga, and they don't have a retail store there. So we showed up to this industrial park, and there's no retail presence. Like you're not supposed to be there. And we sort of walked into this, warehouse with like a little office at the front. And they were kind of like, what are you doing here? And my mom explained that we were into Warhammer and we were looking around. And instead of just telling us to bugger off, they gave us a tour of the warehouse. The guy who was the manager at the time, or regional manager, or whatever he was, took us into his office, and he had sort of a glass case with his Vampire Counts army in it, and he showed it to us. And then some guy came out of the back, and they had scrounged together a whole stack of old White Dwarfs and I think the Citadel Modeling Guide and a bunch of other sort of little booklet things that were valuable to a kid like me at the time. And they gave them to us and said, go check out Square One over in Mississauga, and there's a real Games Workshop store there. So that I will never forget the kindness and warmth that they showed me on that day. So as much as I might complain about Games Workshop, I have so many positive memories associated with Games Workshop. And it was a really, really sweet thing that those guys did. And I'll never forget it. This is interesting. They used to do this in the White Dwarfs sometimes, and I'm not really sure why, because I never used to read these sections, if I'm honest. But you can see this page is this way up, and this page is upside down. And, okay, so it says Mission Impossible. And it gives you some options for what you would do tactically, and then it says, now turn this page upside down to find out how well you've done. That's kind of a fun gimmick. Maybe I'll do that later. Scammim says, Games Workshop in Copenhagen is a sad place at this point. There's a third-party retailer 50 meters down the road with way better stocking. Got my Beast Snaggle box from that other retailer. Yeah, it's certainly changed culturally a lot inside the Games Workshop stores. And the hobby's growing, so maybe they know what they're doing. But I definitely think the retail stores at this point are sort of focused on churning new customers in and then spitting them out into the third-party market to, once realistically, as a retailer, they have to compete with the internet now on margins. So they don't want to have regulars in the store who are just going to be buying recasts and 3D prints and you know, criticizing new players for their paint jobs and stuff like that, because he knows how some guys are. So I don't think they want long-term players in the store anymore. I don't think it's part of their strategy. And, you know, it is what it is. I think it's a bit sad, but there's a lot of really great third-party retailers and independent hobby stores that are sort of picking up the slack in the niche that Games Workshop used to have. So it's not all gone, guys. And so support your independence. Here we go. Here's some more of these. Taken on probably like a disposable camera with a flash. It looks like this is how I used to feel when I was a kid. I'd try to take pictures of our battlefields sometimes, and you know, I'd be like, "Mom, can I take a picture?" And you have to go get the film developed at like the I don't even remember what they call them now. Developer? What do you call someone who develops pictures? It's been so long; they've all been gone. But you get the pictures back and they look like this. It gets washed out and it just has none of the charm and drama that you thought it did, and the disappointment. And mine didn't even look this good, let me tell you. But this is really fun to see these guys battling it out. It's funny, like the ponytail, these guys, I think this is the Goobertown sort of look. It's classic ponytail. This is what Brent is channeling. Is that Alessio Cavatore? Another legend of the old days. Yeah, it is. There it is, Alessio Cavatore. He's a big Vampire Counts guy. So you used to know who all these people were because they'd give them credits and they'd feature them all the time in the magazines. And it's just a little bit more anonymized these days, and maybe that's due to the fact that digital work is easier to collaborate on. Like, I think about that a lot. Like, back in the day, if you're sculpting a miniature, you sculpt the whole thing by yourself with putty, and they say this is done by Colin Dixon, or this is done by whoever. This is done by Alan Perry. This is done by, you know, ooh. But let me finish my point. The point is that nowadays, if you're sculpting a Space Marine, you would go into the central repository, I imagine, and grab the Primaris Intercessor mask. You would grab the skull. You would grab maybe a 3D wireframe of what a Primaris Space Marine looks like, and then maybe you digitally sculpt some extra parts. But it's not really fair to give you credit for that sculpt at that point. So maybe that's one of the reasons they've anonymized crediting the sculpting and the artists. And I'm not saying that that's right or that's good or whatever, but that could be a contributing factor. The Eight-Fingered Man says you either get an enthusiastic lifer behind the counter or one of the newer breed of salesmen. So I'm going to be honest, guys. I remember when I was a kid the high-pressure sales tactics in some of the Games Workshops that we went to. Like, I remember going to one, I think in Calgary, or maybe it was in Red Deer or Edmonton or something, as a kid, and I went in there with my brother, and the guy found out that my brother played Empire, and it was just like, yo man, you need flagellants, and my brother's like, I'm not really interested in flagellants, plus I can't afford to buy a unit of metal troops 2 at a time in a blister pack because I'm a kid, and the guy's like, yo, you need flagellants, and he kept saying, yo dog, you need flagellants, and he was pressuring him so hard to buy flagellants, and it was a bad experience. So the high-pressure sales tactics in Games Workshop is not new, and I think they've always had people who light the spark of the hobby in your eyes and people who are clearly thinking about their sales quota. So I don't think that's changed recently, or I can't comment on whether it's gotten better or worse. But this here, guys, this is the centerfold that got me into the hobby. Not in this particular White Dwarf, but you guys might remember they used to give away a free flyer in Games Workshop, and I had one of those and it had this in it, and we took it in a road trip in the car, and as I was mentioning earlier, some of these plants in the background, and I just remember thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. The detail, you know, like you could just stare at this for hours and see all these different knights, their different little personalities and the different heraldry. And there's guys crouching to take a shot with the bow, and the way that the cliffs loom up so they're clashing in the center of the table, so it has this beautiful sort of composition to the image. And this had a real profound effect on me. And when we got back from that road trip, my brothers and I, we bought some wood elves, we bought some saurus, we bought some skinks, and we got into the hobby. And this image is just gorgeous. I love it. And you know what? I've actually never noticed this before. I don't think I even noticed this as a kid, believe it or not. But oops, there is some ruins in the background up here. I must have noticed this as a kid. I don't know, maybe there was like a text box or something over here in the flyer, because I definitely don't remember seeing this. But I also like how you can, there's a backdrop painted in there, and they've done a really nice job of blending it and then having it sort of disappear into atmospheric perspective with mist. These guys knew what they were doing. They really did. And I still get inspiration from this stuff every day. Actually, I'm going to make a note about that, about making some backdrops, because that's something I've wanted to do for a while. I think that could be really fun. Plaid Peasy Pipe says, "Yo dog, these homies have had traumatic dreams of the Empire falling into flames and their only release is death. Yo dog, you need these G's. They're real home dogs for your state troop homies." Yeah, it was something like that. It was very strange. It was very, very strange. How's the sound quality, guys? I just realized my mic is unplugged. Have I just been silent this whole time? Are you guys just reading my lips? I guess it's using the internal computer mic. Oops. But that's probably one of the reasons everything was overheating, is using an external mic and everything when maybe I don't need to. Maybe you guys get my dulcet tones regardless. Sound quality is fine. Glad to hear it. Kyle Seeley says, "You know what this stream needs? Some flagellants." Couldn't agree more, Kyle! Yo dog, we got flagellants. Beautiful, eh? These are the Mordheim flagellants. Part of my witch hunters gang. And I didn't actually paint these guys, but they painted okay, so I'm not going to repaint them. I bought them off some guy on the Mordheim Trading Post group. Met me in New York. Pretty handy. Moving on. Here we go. Here's the Necromunda terrain that people were talking about. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, this used to come in the Necromunda starter set. So you can build these beautiful verticality structures. Like this is a 4-story structure. And the bulkheads themselves, they have these ladder details, and some of them have doors in them. And then some of these pieces have ladders printed onto them. And this hazard stripes and this silvery blue color. It's just iconic stuff. And this is the sort of thing that made me want to start my channel, is I wanted to sort of create some of this feel, but a little bit more of a scratch build feel with some of the verticality and stuff. Because I really think this is a super inspiring aesthetic that I still think is underrepresented in the hobby. So I'm trying to get you guys to build your own hives. And then I get to look at them, and everybody wins. Ooh, look at that. We've got... Is that Karn? Hey, actually I recognize this. This is a this is the Delac Ganger with the heavy stubber. This is a Necromunda model. Let me see if I can prove it. Yeah. See, it's this guy. This is the model that is the basis of this conversion. Am I right? Or am I right? I know I'm right. And that's obviously based on an... Oh, maybe it's not based... That's based on a witch elf. And here's the fella, I think Paul Sawyer was his name, that they used to call Fat Bloke. And I always thought, he must be a fun guy if he's okay with the nickname Fat Bloke. He's probably a good dude. But I think he works at another war games company in the Nottingham region now, if I'm not mistaken. Warlord Games, I think. A lot of these GW alum have moved on to other companies, and that's probably one of the reasons Games Workshop is so protective of their IP these days. Brendan Sparrow says Paul Sawyer was one of the original 4 gamers too. He sure was. He sure was. He had those black Beastmen. Those were gorgeous. Paul James Farr said, "Love the journals. Fat Bloke was a legend." Mechanical Gamer says, "I will send you my hives." Cool, man. If anybody ever wants to send me anything, just send me an email or a DM, and we'll talk. I really appreciate when you guys want to send me stuff to support me. It's really special. It's really special. Sisters of Battle. I love these outfits. Let me just say. I wish my wife dressed like that. I love you. Or like that. Yeah. She's gonna kill me. Cool. Battle reports. This is one thing where I think I can say that pretty confidently we have advanced as a hobby. Is these battle reports used to be fairly primitive. I mean, I love these little bits of fluff that they would do. Like, see, this is written like a memo, and so they put these like FAO, Archconfessor Kirinov, confidential, authorized personnel only, reference 810 A916. Redemptor, we urgently request your presence on the Xerxes 9 regarding a matter of the utmost delicacy. In the past fortnight, there have been 18 separate reports of Eldar ships illegally entering the atmosphere of Xerxes 9. They have consistently refused to answer our attempts of communication. We have thus far failed to intercept them with our cruisers, and they have declined our offers of a fight. However, at 0217 hours this morning, a Farseer appeared on the planet's surface and led a sizable force of Guardians and Aspect Warriors, supported by Warwalkers, against the shrine of the Nameless Martyr. The shrine itself was leveled to the ground, and survivors report that the Farseer removed the remains of the Nameless Martyr before destroying the building. Our intelligence confirms that they are approaching an abandoned water treatment plant, where we believe they intend to wait for transport off-planet. Needless to say, you can imagine the consequences of our enemies in the Administratum learning of this blunder. And it says, in parentheses, top secret communication from Canoness Amelia to Archconfessor Kirinov, and anonymously leaked to Administrator Jack. Well, I guess I should have been doing a female voice, guys. Oops. But anyways, love that stuff. Love that stuff. That stuff gives a lot of flavor, but actually this one's done pretty well. This is like a really nice picture, but usually there's sort of this polarized quality, stuff like this. And that's not as good as we have today, where we have these guys coming in with their smartphones and fancy camera stuff. But this is actually a beautiful battle report, so I take back a bit of what I said, because this is really well done and really clear what's going on. They have high quality shots of the table, nice swooping arrows indicating the movements. But then you get these. This is what it actually looks like when it's not taken with a professional camera. Two fellas in a Polaroid. That's what a lot of the battle reports look like. Oops, showing too much of my dirty desk. Gregory John says, if GW kind of goes under with the community, Warlord is a solid option. It's $30 for 20 soldiers and $25 for a tank for bolt action. Yeah, Warlord fits a different niche in my opinion. I mean, they've got a lot of historical stuff that's really cool. I think they can, supplement. If you're a Warhammer fan, you can add some of that stuff into the margins. Like, a lot of that stuff would be great for, you could use some of their historicals definitely for Dogs of War or for an Empire army, and you could use, you could probably convert some of their World War II stuff into Special Imperial Guard regiments or something like that if you wanted to. So yeah, Warlord's a good company. I do love plastics. This piece, guys, as a terrain maker, I've always admired this piece. And you can see this influence in some of the terrain pieces I've made, where this is an arch. And this piece is in the background of a lot of the shots that they do. And I just think it looks so cool, and it just adds so much setting and dimension to these tables. And let's see if there's some other photos of this in this. But this is obviously one of the pieces in the studio that they had. And it's got, like any model, you put it on a piece of terrain like this, and it immediately looks amazing. and tells a whole story. Geologically, I'm not the biggest fan of this. It kind of looks like a bunch of boulders piled together. So I don't know what kind of formation geologically that would be, but I still think it looks really cool. Just the mossiness of it. Here's some of these Fraterus militia. Can I just point out that this guy's got like a romance novel sort of chest cleavage going on there? I definitely got to get that model. What a heroic pose he cuts, eh? Like this guy would look great sort of at the front of a boat crossing the Delaware River or something, eh? That's an American history joke for my international crowd. Famous picture called Washington Crossing the Delaware. It's not really a joke, it's a reference, I guess. We'll hold ourselves to higher standards for something we're going to call a joke. E-Boxing Academy says, "What's up, Eric? Is this a White Dwarf mag? Just arrived." Yes, it is, sir. It is a White Dwarf number 213 from 1997. And we're going through it actually much slower than I thought, but we're having a good time, I think, eh? Nick says, "Props to the team who had to come up with all this." I agree. These guys deserve a lot of credit. It's every part of this feels like a labor of tremendous creativity, and there's a reason why I like this stuff so much. I also love the pictures they used to take of the staff. Look at this guy. Mark Hordes of Iniquity Brendan. That's hilarious. That also reminds me of a friend of mine. And Gav Thorpe. There's a funny picture of Gav Thorpe too. Let me just move this around here. This is, I think, maybe my favorite John Blanche painting right here. The Sister of Battle. I just love her pose. And I love the composition. This doesn't have the sketchiness that a lot of John Blanche's work has, at least not in the same degree. I think this particular painting is an absolute masterpiece. And not saying I would do any sort of like Thomas Crown Affair type thing, but if anyone knows where the original painting of this is, you know what, I'm already talking too much. Snitching on myself. No, but I would love to get a John Blanche original. I've already said that. But I would do it, I would buy it. I wouldn't do an Ocean's 11 type heist or anything. It's not like I've always wanted to do that. E-Boxing Academy says, "Oh yes, gonna grab my copy and flip along with you. I invite you to do that. Please do. Please do." Epic 40,000 Tyranids. Can I just point out how amazing this font is? This nice gradient and shine to these letters. I actually tried to commission a logo for the channel in a similar font to like this sort of, these metallic, and I didn't like how it worked. I'm still working on that. You might notice my channel's 2 years old and doesn't have an official logo. And even me just going like this, like a weirdo. But we're working on it. We're working on it. All things in due time, right? At the end of the day, it's not really like Eric's Hobby Workshop is a big corporate entity. It's your boy. There's not going to be any confusion, so... But we're getting there. We're getting there. Slowly but surely. Here we go. This is a section I used to love at the end, which is... Not only do they show the models that are in there, and as you can see, yeah, these are Colin Dixon dwarfs, who's the dwarf king in my opinion, but they also show the bits. So, and you used to be able to call mail order and order just individual bits. If you wanted to work on a conversion, you could call and say, "Hey, I need Hammerer standard top. I need 3 Hammerer standard tops," and some guy would pick it out of a little tub for you in Nottingham or whatever, and mail just those pieces to you. And it's just kind of fun to see the unpainted versions of what you would be getting. I think this would be much less glamorous nowadays because, you know, you would just see a sprue. And sprues aren't as visually appealing as these monopose miniatures. But yeah, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. Awesome. Just flipping through. Whoa! I've never seen that before. Look at this gorgeous illustration of Orion, the king of the wood elves. I'm not sure if he's like a demigod or something, but this is just gorgeous. Look at the muscularity. And you can see actually there's this is the type, this is what I'm talking about. Look how rendered this is. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's like a swirl of ritual scarring or tattoos on his skin. Like the level of detail is just exquisite. And yeah, I mean his face is maybe not perfectly anatomically accurate. Like this is, I forget the name of this artist, but it's very, he's got a very iconic sort of elf look with these long faces. And that was kind of the canonical way to portray elves for a while. It's sort of these unrealistic, very skinny faces that are always scowling. But God, this is just gorgeous. This is just gorgeous. I actually really like this too. This is something I've been meaning to. In the background here, you can see a steep hill that's heavily forested with pines. And that is how a lot of my favorite landscapes out in Alberta look. And I want to do something like that. And then in this foreground, he's got not only this slavering dog of some kind, but also these really nicely rendered. But can I just point out the artistry here, guys? Just while I'm fangirling a little bit. Look at all the colors that he put in these dead logs on the bottom. Like this is a guy who went to art school and paid attention. Like look at this boot. Warm light on the front. Cool edge light on the back. It's gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. Like you can stare at this kind of illustration for ages, just soaking in the details. Like the deep red of this gem. Like look at these Lucky Charms on this belt, eh? You don't see that in the modern illustrations. Just saying. Also, what is Inferno magazine? I've never heard of this before. Does anybody have any Inferno magazines that can tell me what is an Inferno magazine? Scambim says 188 GW Troll. Anyways, that's it, guys. That's issue number 1. White Dwarf 213. Now I'm going to have you guys choose in the chat what we're going to look at next. We have a bunch of options here. Let me put that one. We have, this is a more modern one, White Dwarf 285 from 2003. We have White Dwarf 224 from September, whenever that is. I'm going to guess, well, if 20, yeah, so it'd be 1 year after this one. So this would be 1998. God, look at that. Look at this illustration, guys. Okay, you know what? I'm already leaning towards this one. I'm going to have you guys vote, but just look at that. Look at the background detail there. Gosh darn it. That is some, that's this type of stuff that you don't notice until you notice it, and then your jaw drops. Okay, so let me lay out the numbers. We got Dogs of War, number 225. We got 224. We got 285. And let's pull out a few more. We got 243, 284, 283, and 281. Let's get votes in the chat. Any preference? Any preference? Older, newer? What do you guys think, guys? If nobody says anything, I'm just going to choose one myself. Lorem Ipsum says it's so weird to see the numbering since our White Dwarfs in Germany started way later. Yeah, you know what? I mean, obviously they've reset the numbering again, and they now don't. They're not even the same size anymore. So if you had a shelf that perfectly fit your White Dwarf magazines, well, you need a new shelf for the new magazines, and that's the kind of stuff, guys, that just, ooh, it gets me. Really bugs me. We got 225, 224, 224. I think 224 and 225 are tied right now. 225. People are saying 225. E-Boxing Academy says there's a tutorial to make the big warp tree in that one. There is. I do remember that vividly. This was when the Beastmen Codex came out, and that was a great era too. That was a little later. This is 2003, a couple years later, but I was really into the hobby at that particular time, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I would have been like grade 9, so I wasn't playing a lot, but I never really stopped playing. I mean, I say that I took a break from the hobby, but I always played it around Christmas and stuff with my brothers. Like, we would always dig out the models every year, basically. There was never a full dormancy period of just letting things collect dust for a decade or something. But all right, let's go with 225. 225 seems to be the people's choice. Wow, this is just the back of it. Let's start right here, guys. Can I just point out this beautiful Attilian landscape? First of all, the red tile roof, gorgeous. For those of you who don't know, the Warhammer Old World was set in kind of an analog to Europe, or I guess the world. Like, if you look at the map for what the Warhammer Old World was, it was essentially the world. And one of the things, you know what, I might actually be able to show you a little map because I've got the rule book right here. World of Warhammer 161. So it was essentially the world. So North America, South America, Africa, they're all kind of in the same place. And Europe was divided into kind of the Holy Roman Empire. Oh yeah, so here's the European part of the Old World, guys. Let's take a quick look. Get oriented here. So we have Bretonnia, kind of where modern-day France is. We've got Norska, which is a chaos realm, because in the Warhammer world they had sort of the... I actually forget what it's called, but there was sort of a chaos sort of vortex or something in the north, and so chaos warriors were always coming down from the north, and the Viking type warriors were always chaos corrupted, the marauders, except for the Russians, the Kislevites, which were sort of embodiment of sort of the northern Slavic cultures. They were part of the empire that was sort of a bulwark against chaos, and the empire itself is kind of the Holy Roman Empire, sort of all of the Germanic areas of Europe, all through here. And there's dwarf keeps around here in sort of, you know, a mountain range that doesn't exist in real life. And there's also goblin strongholds and orc strongholds throughout here as well. Down here you get into an area called the Border Princes, where some campaigns were set. You keep going this way, you get to Kemri, which is Egypt and stuff, just like the real world. But Bretonnia's here. So Estalia and Tilia didn't have their own armies. Estalia being Spain, Tilia being Italy. What they had were the Dogs of War. And the Dogs of War in the 5th edition were its own army, but subsequently you could only take them as mercenary units and slap them onto other armies. So this Italian and Spanish aesthetic were really kind of confined to 5th edition. And it's a shame I think they discontinued it, because I find these to be some of the most fun sculpts in the Warhammer catalog. You can see these guys here. I have them right here. New in the box, the Birdmen of Katraza. And this is one of the fun influences of the Dogs of War, was the sketches of Leonardo da Vinci. So these are obviously based on something Da Vinci drew, with almost proto-steampunk type vibes. But here. I want you guys to see my messages. That's weird. So yeah, so the Dogs of War are essentially Spanish and Italian. So I really appreciate seeing, like, this is, if I'm not mistaken, this obviously looks nothing like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but somebody was obviously thinking, medieval Italian. What makes the structure look medieval and Italian? Well, it's got to be leaning, of course. And so there it is. And I think that's kind of fun. But they had this guy, the Dragon Prince Imric, who was a mercenary dragon rider. The Squig says, is it just me or is the camera very laggy? Oh dear. It does look like it's lagging a little bit. We were doing so well, guys, so well. Oh, I'm getting a message saying my battery's not charging. That's not great. That's not great. Now, why wouldn't it be charging? Is there any good reason? Or is it Games Workshop sabotaging independent creators again? With their with their sinister influence, trying to hold me down. Just kidding, just kidding. Anyways, let's get into the magazine. Is everything lagging, guys, or just the video camera? Anyways, Squig says your beautiful voice is nice and clear, though. Well, I appreciate that, man. So here we can see one of the cool things about the Dogs of War is they were a very cosmopolitan force. We got goblins fighting alongside dwarves, fighting alongside ogres, fighting alongside men, and I think that they folded all of the sort of historic. I think Citadel Miniatures made historic models, if I recall correctly, well before my time. But so they had some like Roman legionary type models and Greek and city-state type pikemen, and they folded all of that into the Dogs of War range. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. Okay, right off the bat, not Dogs of War, but look at this Orc Dreadnought. These are Adrian Wood's orcs, as you can see. And this, I remember, Adrian Wood had a really cool orc army. He painted it in this grimdark style, well, at least grimdark for the time. And but it was still full of fun orky details. Like, look at this guy poking out of there, just poking his face through the center. Isn't that like the most orky thing to do? Is get into the most heavily armored machine possible, and then put a little viewing hole for your face to poke out at center mass. Just just so you can see better, of course. Still says my computer is not charging, guys, which is not ideal. Not ideal. Onward we go, fearlessly. If I cut out, I cut out. If I die, I die. It happens. Happens, it happens. What? Now that's something I've never seen. Let me know if any of you guys have seen this before. This is I said. Limited edition female commissar. I've never heard of such a thing or seen it before. I mean, I think there's another female commissar model, but I've never seen this one before. And that's pretty interesting. That is pretty interesting. I kind of like the look of that. That would be cool for like maybe an Escher gang or something too. Dark Eldar, we're pretty new around this era. Here we go. Bronzino's Galloper guns. I think the whole Dogs of War range was sculpted by the Perry brothers, if I'm not mistaken. Well, probably not this dragon. This is probably Trish Morrison, or what's her name now? Trish Cardiff, I think. I could be wrong about that. It'll say at the end. Well, anyways, we'll get there. But I think a lot of these humanoid historical looking models are sculpted by the Perry brothers. If you guys don't know Alan and Michael Perry, they run a company now called Perry Miniatures that still makes historical models in much the same style as these. So if you like this aesthetic, I would definitely recommend you go check them out. I have some of their stuff, and it's good stuff. These guys, this is what I'm talking about here. These are guys called the Al-Qatani Fellowship. And this is, to me, golden era. This is the best you can get for a square base Warhammer. This is the peak. The fact that there's, yes, they're metal models, yes, they're monopose, but there's enough unique sculpts that the unit looks alive. As you can see, there are guys for the front rank who are bracing their pikes with their foot. There are guys for the second rank who have their pikes angled to create this sort of hedgehog with bristling pikes. There's a unique command model who's got an eye patch, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the same fellow on the cover here. There are models for the back ranks who have their pikes straight up in the air. And that, to me, this is peak square base regimented Warhammer. This is the best it gets right here. And so I've been trying to collect some Dogs of War over the years. They're pretty expensive, but slowly, I'm putting together a Dogs of War army. This is another Dogs of War unit. These are long-drawn Slayer pirates. They're kind of like pirate dwarves that just tag along. One of the reasons it's the coolest army. Here we go. There's Fat Bloke again, guys. Doesn't this guy look like fun? It's just really hard to picture them doing this in a modern White Dwarf magazine. Well, let's get 4 pictures of some guy eating chicken wings and crab. It just looks like they're having so much fun, doesn't it? What? Look at this. An ancient Warhammer game. Chaos Gate. And the graphics look kind of wretched, but I wonder if that was any good. I certainly wasn't aware of it when I was a kid, when I used to actually play some computer games sometimes. Did anybody play this? Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat. Oh, Tunguska Lumberjack said, message deleted by the Google moderator team. Ooh, I wish I'd seen that. Sounds spicy. Sounds spicy. No, Paul, they aren't Tyranid bioconstructs. Flat Bloke has crabs. This is just the stuff that you just don't print anymore. You just don't print them anymore. Laser Wombat says, oh my god, Chaos Gate was such a good gate at the time. Really? Interesting. So, you command squads of Ultramarines in deadly combat with the forces of Chaos. More details next issue. Yeah, it looks like fun. That's pretty cool. George Grimes says, hi, bro. Hi, George Grimes. Welcome. Here we go. This is a classic starter set. You guys probably remember. You know, this is funny because at the time, I never glanced twice at this particular cover illustration. And I used to have this rule book. I didn't actually have the starter set, but somehow I ended up with this rule book. But this is a great illustration by John Blanche. And some guy on Instagram, and I wish I could tell him his name and give him a proper plug. If anybody knows in the chat, let me know. Did a diorama recreating each Black Templar in this thing and sort of made a really cool diorama of like a pile of Black Templars in this exact same formation as his cover illustration from, what is this, 2nd edition? 3rd edition? This is 3rd edition. 3rd edition 40K. And that is pretty cool. I was actually, I grew up with so many Black Templars around, and I think they're really cool. I was surprised to learn that they weren't one of the original legions. And in case you guys didn't know, they are an Imperial Fist's successor chapter. Um, but yeah, here's a better look at that same John Blanche illustration. You can see it's just like these, it's just crusted with detail. Like from everything from, the broken stone aquila and skulls and the pile of rubble that they're on. Obviously the color palette is classic Blanchitsu, so to speak. I love the yellow plasma pistol for some reason. I think it just contrasts really nicely. You know what? Maybe I'll do that for one of my Death Company models. Yellow plasma pistol. Write that down. And there's some Night Lords. I think Night Lords look better in the present edition personally, but they still look cool. These guys, these trees were a big part of the look of this era. These are solid plastic canopy trees that Games Workshop came out with. So I guess this is kind of a harbinger of things to come, the direction Games Workshop was going in terms of terrain. Seb G says hi from France. Hey. Tunguska Lumberjack says, it wasn't anything spicy, sorry, it was a list of the subscription prices in 1990. I can't imagine why it was deleted. Well, Tunguska Lumberjack, if you were posting prices, I think it was probably just, they just probably blocked it automatically because they were worried you were a sales bot trying to sell something. That's my guess. But no worries, I'm glad it wasn't anything spicy. Oh, kind of glad. I like a little bit of drama from time to time, but I'm glad to have you on my side. E-Boxing Academy said, I always thought those bikers were so chunky. Which ones? The Chaos ones? Or these guys? They're all kind of chunky in this era, to be honest. Here we go. The Dogs of War. What do you guys think of this era of ogre compared to the more recent ogres? I kind of like them, I kind of don't. Like, the size of the hand is absolutely madness. Like, if you compare this to another model the same scale, it's like that's a torso-sized hand, which isn't inappropriate for an ogre, I don't think. But this is a set of proportions that's very, very old hammer, and I don't know how else to describe it. And the way the face is designed too. It might be designed sort of looking head on so the face casts properly. This might be like a limitation of the technology thing shining through, and but it really has a distinctive look. Just musing on that a little bit. Here we have a Dogs of War army. Yeah, you can see they have all these elements that you just don't see in other armies. Like, look at these Pavis shields. Like, how cool is that? Like, these shields that stand on the ground with crossbowmen in behind them. These are, I think, no, these aren't Marksmen of Merigliano. What are these? Braganza's Besiegers, maybe. And then these are just Empire handgunners, I think, thrown in there. Some old Knights Panther. Or maybe those are something else. I don't know. Anyways, moving on. There we go. Bronzino's Galloper guns and the Marksmen of Merigliano. This is what I love about this sort of thing. Is just the humanity of these characters. You don't get this in a multi-pose plastic kit. You don't get the sort of mundane, like nobody would assemble their models with one hand holding the lengths of rope that go around the torso. Nobody would give their model the bucket if he doesn't have a weapon in his other hand. But I think it adds a lot. I think it's actually really, really nice. And by the way, guys, I learned this recently. I've seen my whole life long these sort of swabs for the cannon. And, I'm not a historical reenactment expert, but I always thought these would be used like a Q-tip, sort of just to clean the barrels. But they were actually, so this is like sheep's wool, usually. Like it would be a fleece wrapped around there, and they would dip it in a bucket of water and then stick it down the barrel of the cannon, not just to wash it, but also because the wet wool would extinguish any sparks or smoldering pieces of powder or whatever that would then make it safe to load the gun again. So these would actually be put into the cannon wet, which is not something that I knew until I read a historical novel where they were talking about that. And if anybody's more of an expert in guns in the chat who can add any more detail or correct me on that. Ramrods. So Adam Bryant, I don't think that's a ramrod. I thought that was a ramrod. A ramrod being, for those who don't know, on a musket, you load the ball, like you put powder and a ball, and then you ram it down with a ramrod to make sure it's nice and packed before you aim it and shoot it. This I don't think is that. This I think is for cleaning it in between. Maybe one of them is a ramrod and one of them is for cleaning it and wetting the barrel. Maybe someone can shed some light on that. Julius Lazarowicz says, which issue is this? This is issue 225 from October, what did we say, 1998? This is White Dwarf 225, October 1998. And is this UK or US version? This is USA. Zidane said sound went off. Really? Can you guys not hear me? Sound went off, really? Somebody please confirm in the chat that you can hear what I'm saying, that I haven't just been screaming into the void this whole time. That I don't have 148 concurrent viewers just watching me embarrass myself. Yeah, Zidane's saying, anyone else without sound? Come on, guys, let me know. If the sound went off, that would be... Okay, it's just you. It's just you, Zidane. It's just you. I think Zidane was sent by Games Workshop to try to get me off of my flow. What do you guys think? Games Workshop legal team sent him in here to disrupt. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Like, look at this, guys. This is one of the other really brilliant things about the Dogs of War. Like, one of the biggest complaints about metal models is you have the same model repeated over and over and over and over and over. So maybe there's 4 variations of the Spearman, and in a unit of 20, you have each Spearman repeat 4 or 5 times. And your eye can really pick up patterns like that pretty easily, and sometimes it jumps out at your eye and doesn't look good. And that is a valid criticism of a lot of the Warhammer Fantasy ranges. But look at the Dogs of War, guys. How many unique sculpts are in this regiment here? I think every single one of these is a unique sculpt. Like, this guy has this male cowl, this male coif. This guy has this fur hat. This guy has this sort of, what would you call that, a turtleneck. Obviously the command group is unique. This guy's got a helmet. This guy's got a wound. This guy's got a hat. This guy's got a skull cap. So we're deep into the second rank here, and everybody even in the second rank is a unique sculpt. That's amazing. So there's maybe 16 unique metal sculpts in this unit of Marksmen of Miragliano. And that is, I mean, a labor of love. What else can you say? Sculpted by Alan Perry. These guys are incredibly, incredibly prolific. They must have sculpted thousands of different miniatures over the years, and each one of them has this wonderful personality to them. Truly legends of the hobby, guys. Go support Perry Miniatures if you like this sort of stuff. GW says, one of the Perry brothers blew his arm off reenacting with a cannon. He sculpts one-handed now. That's true. That's a fun fact that people like to throw around. I would imagine, you know, if it were me, I wouldn't want that to be the first thing people said every time my name was brought up, so I don't like to mention that. But I don't know. I mean, maybe he likes telling the story. I'm sure he gets beers bought for him so he can tell the story. But regardless of status of any past injuries, they're both super talented sculptors. But it is an impressive thing. I do think most of the time people bring that up. It is to put a feather in his cap of how good of a sculptor he is that he was able to come back. But yeah, So, like I said, the dragon is Trish Morrison. If you guys don't know Trish Morrison, she's now Trish Cardiff, I believe, and you can find her on Instagram because she posts some really cool behind-the-scenes photos and sketches from when she used to sculpt monsters for Games Workshop. Pretty much all the monsters from this era, or a good chunk of them, were done by her. And then yeah, Chris Fitzpatrick is a guy who came in and started doing some Dark Eldar stuff. And so they would always, you know, depending on what range it was for, the people in the riding the monster would maybe be done by somebody else. But yeah, for vehicles and monsters, they often used to have collaborations on the sculpts. And here we go, Colin Dixon with the dwarfs. Colin Dixon being the king of dwarfs, as I've said many times before. And again, see, here's what I'm talking about. Here's where you get into the weakness. And no slight on Colin Dixon, but this is the downside of Warhammer Fantasy, is when you start to see these repeated silhouettes. This repeated silhouette that doesn't look natural. That, to me, is the biggest downside of Warhammer Fantasy. I try my hardest to avoid that in my armies, whether it's through conversion or carefully making sure that that the guys are spaced out enough, or maybe, you know, if one of them is facing square forward on his stand and the other one is facing side face. Sometimes there's ways you can cheat around it, but sometimes you can't avoid it. Sometimes you just have an awkwardly repeating regiment, and that's something I don't miss about Warhammer Fantasy. Michael Adams asks, what was her name again? Well, as you can see here, she's credited as Trish Morrison, because if I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken, she was married to Ali Morrison at the time, but I think now she's gone to Trish Cardiff. Trish Cardiff, which is either her maiden name or the name of another husband, or I don't know. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that's what she goes by now. Yeah. This is one of my favorite models, Lucrezia Belladonna, and she's sitting side saddle, and she just has such a great regal bearing to her. I think it's like the snootiness. This model is really often converted to be a Lamia vampire, which is one of the female vampires in the vampire counts range, and I think you can obviously see why. It just has such a great arrogance, like it's like a Queen Cersei type vibe of just like contempt, and it's just brilliant. So hats off to Chris Fitzpatrick for that one. Here we have Mercenary General. This is interesting. They have these barbute helmets. If you look at this sort of helmet with this style, that's sort of like a Spartan slit in the helmet down the center. That's called a barbute. And there's one model in the Bretonnian range that has a barbute, and that's the Green Knight. But for the most part, they use different helmet styles to distinguish between the human factions. So the Empire has the sallet helms in the later 15th century sort of helms. And Bretonnia has sort of Dark Ages Crusader helm, not Dark Ages, sorry, early medieval period, 12th century, sort of 11th century Crusader helms. Here we go, guys. Here's a really bad example of what I was talking about. Bjorg Bearstruck and the Bearmen of Urslo. Look at this repeating pattern of axes. That is just not ideal, you know? And you can tell what they've done here with the models is they've used the same base model and changed the faces. And so the entire regiment is in the same pose. And that makes them look like a synchronized swimming team or like a flash mob or something like that. And that's the bad side of Warhammer Fantasy that the nostalgics often gloss over. But we don't pull any punches here on Eric's Hobby Workshop, guys. Zidane says something that was possible with those metal minis was actually just bending the arms slightly. Yeah, that's a good point. And they say to do that in the in the modeling guide. They give the example of Savage Orcs, which have their arms over their head, and if some of them are on different angles, it does look wild and different. you're not bending these arms out of position to the point that this is going to make this look good. So that's of limited utility, and also if you bend it too far, you're going to break it. Here's something interesting to know about metal models, guys. Is there's a phenomenon called work hardening when you're dealing with metal components. So, like if you have a paper clip, I'm sure you guys have all done this if you're sitting at your desk and fidgeting like a madman, like I do. If you have a paper clip, and here we go. I've got a little piece of wire. That's not a good piece of wire. If you have a paper clip and you bend it back and forth a bunch of times, eventually it will snap. And the reason for that is called work hardening, which is essentially the pliability of the model is reduced by the motion inside of it. The molecules line up in a way where the metal actually becomes more brittle, and that will cause it to snap. Now, Warhammer pieces are prone to this same thing, but you can fix that. You can fix that by applying heat and annealing the metal, which rearranges the molecules inside of it and restores some of the pliability and the ability of the model to bend and act softly and not be so brittle. So if you have a model that's bent way out of shape, I'm not an expert in this by any means, but I have seen someone recommend that you put it in a bag of, or put it in a container of boiling water, and even boiling water will be warm enough to help anneal partially the model, reset those internal molecular structures, and restore a bit of pliability, because you don't want your metal models to snap, because when they get brittle and they snap, it's really, really hard to repair them because it's not usually a clean break. And gluing metal to metal is never very strong anyways. Something like a spear, you're not going to have enough diameter to put a pin in there or something. Zidane says, yeah, heat relaxes the molecule structure. That's exactly right. The heat anneals it and resets the molecular structure inside. So yeah, hopefully that's useful to you guys that are messing around with metal models still in some capacity, or maybe in some other aspect of your life. That'll come up one day. Here are Adrian Wood's orcs that we were talking about earlier. This is one of the coolest armies of this era, in my opinion. If you look at the color palette just at a glance, I think it's timeless, really. You know, grimdark with little splashes of color. This is exactly what I want to see in an orc army. This is exactly what I want to see. In my opinion, the modern GW take on orcs is a little bit too much color. Like, I get that it's a studio army and that they want to, but that is too colorful to me. Like, that's too much yellow. That's the right amount of yellow. If you want your accent color on your orcs to be yellow, I would lean towards this and less to this. But, you know, if it's your second army and you want to splash a different color, or you want to contrast, then I understand that. But again, it comes down to personal preference. But I from a taste perspective, I really like Adrian Wood's approach. And look at this. They've broken down extensively, piece by piece, the conversion work that he did to make these dreadnoughts. Like, cut off all the wheel axles from these, what are these, squig catapult models. And they literally show you how to kit bash this pretty involved conversion, and then they show you all the parts to order from the troll store to do it. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. It's been a long time since they did stuff like this. And of course, I mean, I wonder how many people actually did this. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a number that you can count on one hand, but it's still cool to sort of vicariously look at this and think about all the possibilities for your own conversions. Another recruitment ad. I like this. They have like a Dogs of War recruiter, like a paymaster. Or maybe I'm just using my... No, that's definitely a Dogs of War. You can see he's got the Lustrian looted glyphs on his horse and stuff like that. Alright, now we get into Mordheim. Woo! As I mentioned before, guys, if you were tuned in earlier, Thomas Piernan is one of the key writers for the Mordheim project, and this stuff just still to this day captures my imagination. So this is a bunch of rules for weapons and stuff. There is a community version of Mordheim rules called Broheim. If you go to broheim.net, you can find free rules for Mordheim if you're interested in playing with your friends. You don't need to try to track down a rule book on the internet or the old White Dwarfs, because people have put it together all together. And I don't say that because, you know, I want to take money out of the pockets of Games Workshop or anything like that. It's just because I think the more people that can easily access the rule set and get into the hobby, the better, personally. So here we got some Reclander Mercenaries. These are fairly straightforward. I don't think there's any involved conversion work, but there is something interesting to mention about these old state troops. And I've actually been looking for is these state troops had two iterations. So towards the end of 5th edition, they released these multi-part boxes of state troops for the Empire, and they had some of the metal arms with the different weapons. So they were basic plastic state troops with metal arms, and like they think these crossbows might be metal, and these halberds might be metal. And then they re-released the same boxes in 6th edition, but with a weapon sprue done in plastic. So for some reason, I want to get a hold of some of the 5th edition versions with the metal arms. The handguns, for example, are much smaller than the ones in 6th edition. And, I mean, they didn't even do multi-part handgunners in 6th edition. They only did the ones that came in the starter set. But if anyone has a lead on that stuff, holler at your boy. Yeah, that's a little aside that probably nobody else cares about. Ooh. This is, I'm happy to see, intact punch cards for, I think, Battlefleet Gothic. I can't imagine what else this would be. These look like Chaos ships. I've never actually played Battlefleet Gothic, but I think it's a really cool looking game. And this kind of just interjects into the middle of the Mordheim section here, because I guess they needed the cards to be in the center of the magazine. There's some dungeon tiles too here. That's very interesting. The skeleton's a little bit out of scale, but it's interesting to see dungeon tiles in the middle of a Warhammer magazine these days. This is interesting. The guys used Necromunda gangers to create some Chaos Cultists here. And they fit the bill pretty nicely, although you can see some of these poses. These guys are holding spears, but they were very clearly originally holding a gun. Because who holds a spear like this? And it's like, these guys have either never held spears before in their life, or they're using a technique that I'm unfamiliar with. But they still look pretty good, I have to say. I like this guy who's gesturing with his shield. That's pretty cool. Paul Little says, I love the Dread. Studio orcs were too colorful back then too. I built one proper heavy metal. Me. How do I send you a picture of it? Send me an email, Paul. ericshobbyworkshop@gmail.com or at ericshobbyworkshop on Instagram. Send me a picture on there. I'd love to see that. That's really cool. That's really cool. Zidden has had a message deleted by the Google moderator team. Was it spicy, Zidden? Was it spicy? What did you say? What did you say? Don't say exactly the same thing, obviously. You'll get tossed again, but what did you say? Was it a pricing thing? It seems like it doesn't like prices. Yeah. Anyways, here's another Necromunda gang. And not Necromunda, Mordheim, but it's using more Necromunda pieces, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it says right here. Both these witch hunters are based on Necromunda Redemptionist models. I like this one, how it has this sort of dark face. You know, pointy hoods are very controversial in the hobby these days, but I do think they have a good menace to them. Some nice witch hunter models, beautiful. This is a classic warrior priest that just has that sort of classic vibe to me. I really like the 6th edition ones, but that one's cool too. What I don't like is this flagellant. I think he looks really weird. He looks like a giant dwarf. His feet are too big. I do like his pose though. We've all seen these sort of types of characters, sometimes homeless guys that just sort of shout at the sky. I think it captured that emotion pretty nicely. Oh, interesting. I was just gonna wonder what dog miniatures these are, because there's not a lot of dog miniatures, but these are Marauder Dark Elf Warhounds. Good to know. Plaid PVC Pipe is taking off. Thanks for tuning in, Plaid PVC Pipe. Appreciated you having you in the chat. Have a good day, man. Ooh, look at this guy. This is beautiful. This is another example of the Skaven studio army at the time was very heavy on purples and reds and saturated greens. And this is a Skaven Giselle guy done in a more grimdark style, and I think it's gorgeous. I think he's done a really nice job here. And doesn't this make you just want to collect a little warband of Ratmen? This is why I love these game systems like Necromunda and Skaven. It's because they're a low barrier to entry. Like it's a big task to start a new army, but I mean, this is Skaven gang. These are all kind of big gangs, but you really only need a handful of models to play Mordheim. You only need 10 or something. And I think even when you're busy, like even busy people, it's a lot more manageable to do 10 models than to do an entire army worth. Oh, here's one of these comic strips that they used to put in. These are pretty fun. I think, if I'm honest, if you guys want my critical opinion of these comic strips, I think that they have some issues reading. Like the images don't read very clearly what's going on. Like you kind of have to stare at them to pick out what you're supposed to be looking at. Like when you look closely, you can see it's like, okay, there's buildings, and guys in the center. And you know, there's some really good ideas for architectural elements. If you were into Mordheim and you're looking for ideas of shapes of buildings or for details or for window styles or for door styles or just little stylistic elements like things like this just 2 steps before the front door. You know, like the sill and sash and the arched window, things like that, then these comics are a great source for that. But sometimes it's hard to tell at a glance what's going on in some of these comics. And part of that is the fact that they're not in color. So this artist is probably assisted by the guy who does the coloration when he works in other media. But anyways, these are fun. These are fun if you're into Mordheim. You might want to look into these. I also like this, just in terms of an idea for like a little piece of scatter terrain. There's a wagon missing 1 wheel, barrel smashed on the ground next to it. That's a great piece of cover to put in the middle of a street. And then, yeah. So, tons of inspiration throughout these things. Zidane says, yeah, it wasn't a link, it was how to not post a link that was easy to interpret. Interesting. Interesting. Zidane says they used to have stores called Battle Bunkers where they had lots of events and stuff around the 2000s. I dimly recall that. I dimly recall the Battle Bunker thing, but I don't really remember. Interesting. The script to the comic strip is Dan Abnett. Hey, I didn't notice that. Oh yeah, script Dan Abnett. Nice spot. Dan Abnett does a lot of the Horus Heresy, or at least the Black Library novels. I actually just picked up one about Titans by Dan Abnett because, as I was mentioning before, I don't know much about Titans. I want to know a little bit more. This is the sort of stuff I love seeing in White Dwarf. This is Jess Goodwin's concept art. And Jess Goodwin is one of the few guys from this golden era who's still with Games Workshop. And he's like, I forget his exact title, but he's like the head designer. Like he calls all the shots for how all the ranges look. So he's behind the Dark Eldar, and he's got his hands all over the Primaris, everything, and he's an incredibly talented guy. Like he, more than anybody, came up with the look of the Eldar, which I think is one of the most timeless and unique looks among Games Workshop's intellectual properties. So sort of on the pantheon, like on the Mount Rushmore of Games Workshop creatives, I've got Jess Goodwin up there next to John Blanche, and I don't know who the others would be. What do you guys think in the chat? Let me know who's on the Mount Rushmore of Games Workshop creatives over the years. Who's up there? Who's on your Mount Rushmore? Mount Rushmore, I think everybody knows what Mount Rushmore is, but just in case you guys don't, in the United States, there's a mountain range in the Dakotas that features 4 presidents. And so when people talk about what is your Mount Rushmore, it's kind of just name the top 4 most prolific, most legendary of the whatever. So who are your guys' top 4? Who's on your Games Workshop Mount Rushmore? That's what I want to know. This looks like a full explanation of Battlefield Gothic rules. This is interesting because they haven't called it Battlefield Gothic. They're calling it Spaceship Battles, which I guess still needed to be workshopped a little bit. Whatever else says John Blanche has his own mountain. Interesting. Brian Ansel probably for early rules. Fair enough. Andy Chambers. Andy Chambers is a good. Yeah. Who else could be on there? Like Alessio Cavatore and Thomas Pirinen would be a strong candidate in my books. I'd have to think about it for a while though and really compare. Because sometimes you don't even realize who's behind some things until you look into it a little bit more. So DPS God says, I might be biased, but the Perry twins. I totally agree that the Perry twins are legendary. I'm thinking more in terms of creative and concepts. Like, I guess the Perry brothers brought a ton of historical realism to Games Workshop, but I'm not sure they brought unique IP concepts in the way that like Blanche and Goodwin did. Karl Kopinski, I'm not sure also how much he was involved in concepts. I know he did a lot of the really gorgeous box art and illustrations in the 6th, 5th edition era. So he's, I guess it kind of depends on what criteria you're using. He's definitely a legendary guy. I follow him on Instagram. He does a lot of really, really cool paintings. He's Silver Scratch Built says Mike McVie. I always liked Mike McVie. I said Mike McVeigh for almost my whole life until I heard somebody else say Mike McVie, and then I questioned myself and started saying Mike McVie. But does anybody know him or know of him or know if it's McVie or McVeigh? Because I would appreciate. I don't like saying things improperly, so. Tunguska Lumberjack says Rushmore 40K, Blanche Goodwin, Wayne England, Paul Dainton, Edgar Skomorowski. I'm not going to lie, I'm not familiar with some of those names. Do you want to give a quick rundown? Kaiser says Rick Priestley, surely. I think that's a very strong candidate as well. I think you can make a very good case for Rick Priestley for sure. Ooh, the Warhammer Fortress. I've always loved the Warhammer Fortress, guys. I mean, I just today released a video of a fortress that I built. You can see it in the background there, actually, just over my shoulder. You guys see that? If you want to learn how to build that and you haven't watched the video yet, go watch it. And if you have watched it, open a new window, put it on, and just let it run. No, I'm just kidding. Don't game the views just to support your boy. I would hate that. But yeah, I absolutely love this. Like, what is cooler than a siege scene from a viewing perspective, you know? This is just really special stuff. Really good stuff. More of these tiles, more Battlefield Gothic pieces. Guys, I don't know about you, but oh, you know what? Now that I see this, I know what these dungeon tiles are for, even though we haven't got to it yet. This must be for Dungeon Bowl. There's it's a Blood Bowl sort of modification that takes place in a dungeon. That must be what this is for. There's a guy I follow on Instagram called Redbeard Hobby, who was making a dungeon for Dungeon Bowl the other day. He's a good follow if you guys are interested. Redbeard Hobby. He does Mordheim stuff. I used to like a couple years ago. He kind of bounces from project to project. He was making a Space Hulk table. He's got good taste. So check him out if you guys are into that sort of thing. Wayne England for his illustrations in the 40K rulebooks around 3rd, 4th, I think. Oh, you know what? I think I have a print of a Wayne England. I don't know where it is, but Rick and Jervis. Jervis Johnson. Good choice. I know Jervis Johnson is prolific. Yep, Speak of the Devil. Dungeon Bowl by Jervis Johnson. Here we are. I know, so Jervis created Blood Bowl. What else did he create? Ian Miller for Realm of Chaos. Yeah, let's see, you open treasure chests. I've never played Blood Bowl. Is it worth trying? Does anyone in the chat have any opinion on whether or not I should try Blood Bowl? Here we go. See, Space Marine Command Squad, designed by Jess Goodwin. This is actually kind of maybe the start of the era of saying designed by rather than sculpted by. And I think that has to do with a shift from just getting an artist and saying, getting a sculptor and saying, hey, Trish, we need a dragon. Can you make us a dragon? And actually, I imagine Jess Goodwin extensively designed the look of the Space Marine range with all kinds of concept art. And there's a famous picture of him sitting in front of sort of like a mugshot picture of a Space Marine done in sort of like profile and front views. And so when you say designed by Jess Goodwin, I think he gets the credit for being the guy who developed the look of Space Marine power armor. And that is, obviously a very big deal. That's beyond iconic in the 40K canon, is the look of Space Marines. They really do look distinctive from other super soldiers from other IPs, like a Halo Master Chief or something. And there's a lot of visual elements like the bell-bottomed plates. And I've talked about this before. These bell-bottom greaves, I think, make them look not only unique, but very solid. Because if you look in nature, there's something called the inverse square rule where, like if you take a cube that's 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch, it has a volume of 1 inch square. And if you double each side, then it all of a sudden has a volume that is 8 inches square. 2 by 2 by 2. So even though all the dimensions doubled, the volume went up exponentially. And this is true. This creates issues in nature. Like this is why an elephant and a rhinoceros have to have big, thick, sturdy legs. And it's because the larger the animal gets, it can't have the same skinny legs that an ant would have, because the mass has gone up exponentially with the size of the animal. So the mass and the weight goes up at a faster rate to just than the size. I'm doing a bad job of explaining it, but that is why I think these elephantine, solid-looking legs are a good look for Space Marines, because it makes them look solid. It makes them look formidable and heavy and solid. Solid's the best word for it. Paul Little says, anyone else see Jess's sketchbook he brought to events? Always wish they'd gone in the direction he proposed for Guard. And what is the direction he proposed for Guard? That sounds really interesting. Jervis started in the early 80s with GW and had his hand in rules and background ever since. He's just retired. He's on my Mount Rushmore right next to Rick. Yeah, I know that Jervis just retired. That's a big deal. I think they did a cool retrospective for him in the most recent White Dwarf, but I actually don't read White Dwarf anymore, guys, if I'm honest. But if anyone picked that up and thinks I should pick it up, then let me know, because I do think that's cool that they did that for him. Can I just point out the Siege Tower is just really, really, really cool. Look at this. This is the sort of stuff that I wanted to put in my Chaos video that actually got bumped to another video, is demonic mouths spitting out guns and things like that. Demonic gun emplacements for the Chaos Fortress. So there's going to be more of this sort of thing coming as I expand the system down the line. I just think that's really cool. Whoever did that, That's really cool. And this here, this ugly fellow, you guys may or may not recognize, this is a mutie. So this is one of the noble mutants that lives on the planet of Gorkamorka. And they actually have pretty high-tech technology as they go to war with the Diggas and the Orcs. They're very rare these days. Squig says, will this be up on YouTube after? I really need to sleep, but I love this. Maybe I'll leave it up on YouTube for a little bit. I usually put them over on my Patreon page if I think they're worth watching again. Yeah, no, I think I'm going to keep putting it on my Patreon page. It's, my patrons can get the first dibs. Maybe I'll unarchive these eventually, but if you want to watch it, you got to become a patron. Them's the breaks, pal. Or you got to catch it alive. Kaiser says, honorable mention to Andy Chambers' facial hair. Paul Little says, there was a single illustration in the 2nd edition Guard Codex. Paul Little says, oh, great coated lasgun like the one that he gave the Eshgangers. I saw this recently. And maybe I don't want to draw too much attention to it, but I think somebody made some free 3D prints of this. Like an Imperial Guard concept that never came to life. So those of you with the 3D printers, maybe if you dig around a little bit, you'll be able to find free STLs for these unreleased Guard sort of concepts. Completely unofficial, of course, and non-profit, I'm sure. Paul Little, enclosed helm standing in a snow/dust drift. Yeah, that's totally the same stuff. Chambers is at Warlord Miniatures now? Interesting. I like this. They used to do grand openings for individual stores. Does anybody else have these like sort of weird dreams? You know, materialistic, strange dreams of like going into an old store and just like pulling Space Hulk boxes off the shelves and Gorkamorka. Good times. Like just like this is like looking into Tutankhamun's tomb. You know, just all the treasures in there. Speaking of which, guys, it wouldn't be a proper stream if I didn't go down a little bit of a conspiracy rabbit hole now, wouldn't it? I saw a video recently saying that Tutankhamun's tomb was a hoax. And I, at first was like, oh, of course it's not a hoax. How could it be a hoax? And, well, they laid out some compelling arguments. Like, because none of the funerary goods really belonged to Tutankhamun, for one, which is very strange. Some of them belonged to his mother. Some of them are very clearly for women. Like even the funerary mask is like welded together and it has pierced ears, which is very unusual for a male. And sort of the conventional Egyptological wisdom is that it was rushed. Tutankhamun was young, he died quickly, and so his burial was rushed and a lot of his funerary goods were repurposed, which is strange because he ruled for several years, and pharaohs were super obsessed with their passage into the afterlife. So anyways, I shouldn't go down this rabbit hole, but we're looking at White Dwarf, guys, but look into the Tutankhamun tomb hoax theory. The theory is that it was actually the tomb of Nefertiti and another crown prince of contemporary thing that was done together, dressed up to look like Tutankhamun's tomb, just so they could say they found an actual pharaoh. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. It definitely got my brain going. Anyways, back to the Golden Demon. This is really cool stuff. This is Dave Andrews' dioramas. These, I really love these. For one, he's got this bomber pilot thing, and this is kind of a proto-Sol Vince type thing. And when I say Sol Vince, I'm talking about cutting and matching different plastic Games Workshop kits. Like if you look along the bottom here of this sort of recessed hangar area, these are parts of Necromunda bulkheads that are trimmed to size. It might be hard for you guys to see that. And then these parts here are also part of the Cities of Death kits. And then you can see these braces here that are sticking into the room like buttresses. These are also trimmed pieces of the Necromunda bulkhead kits. These are the top portions of the Necromunda bulkhead kits that he's added rivets to. And it's just a really nice job of kit bashing existing GW plastics to get a really, really crisp result. And this sort of stuff is really inspiring to me. And I'm sure there's more and more details that would jump out the longer I looked at it. And this I really like as well, this Bretonnian Joust diorama. I'm not such a huge fan of this in the background. You know what this reminds me of? Is if you guys have watched Breaking Bad, Saul Goodman in his office, he has like the Constitution printed on the walls behind him, and it's like, it's pretty corny. But no, this is still a really cool diorama regardless. I wonder what these models are here. These medieval dressed sort of models, if they're individually sculpted. This one here seems to be the mounted damsel that's converted to be standing in this viewing box. But there's one here that's like a courtesan or something. It's might be hard for you guys to tell, but she's holding like a hand fan. Like there's really a lot going on here with the NPCs, the civilian type characters. And it's very unusual for Games Workshop to feature non-Citadel miniatures. And when I say unusual, I mean I think it's a policy that they never do it. And the same thing over here. Like, you know, maybe these are a little bit easier to spot. Like I think this is a Katachan guy with a hat sculpted on him. But it's interesting. It's interesting to think about. It's always like civilian miniatures, as I've said before. This, I don't know how to feel about this. This is a Golden Demon winner, guys. This is your 1998 Golden Demon winner, Jeff Wilson. I just can't picture moss and clump foliage used this extensively being in a Golden Demon winner in today's day and age. Yeah. I just can't picture it. Peter Gronfeld says, just dropping by, won't be able to stick around, latest here in Denmark, but I love your channel and just wanted to tell you. Thanks very much, Peter. I appreciate that. In my dream, I found a pile of very rare bits and miniatures under my bed. Yeah, see? I have that too. I have, like, you open up a chest and it's full of rare miniatures and bits, and you wake up excited and you go, oh, that wasn't real. Oh, well. Hartmansgrad said, Victorians lied all the time about history too. Yeah, I don't think that was the Victorian era. But yeah, I mean, the guy, the circumstances are suspicious. Let's just leave it at that. So this is the thing, the curse of the 90s staff-led discount. He died very suddenly, yeah. What are you talking about, Paul Little? Who died very suddenly? Are you talking about Tutankhamun's curse? Are we talking about Tutankhamun again? Because the theory kind of implied that the Tutankhamun's curse was Howard Carter, who's the main guy who found the tomb, sort of covering up his little scam after the fact. So all these unfortunate deaths surrounding the thing. And of course, the video I watched, they stopped short of besmirching Howard Carter, who's a legendary Egyptologist, because there's, you know, not overwhelming evidence to make such a horrible, horrible accusation. But I think there's a movie there at least. That would be a ton of fun as a movie. Yeah. More Golden Demon stuff, guys. Hey, look at this. This is a Basilisk tank that has the back of it covered in. I actually bought one off eBay recently that looks kind of like this. I think it's I think they call this Armageddon pattern, where somebody, the previous owner, sculpted this sort of back hatch to the Basilisk tank. For those who aren't familiar, normally it ends here. There's just kind of a piece of shielding. So this whole back hatch here has been custom sculpted on, and I think that's really cool. But it's kind of fun to see another one in here. And this will be featured in an upcoming video, you guys will see. Here we have a Bloodthirster. Bloodthirsters were really common to see in the games, in the Golden Demon stuff back in the day. They were big, spectacular models that everybody wanted, and it's absolutely not uncommon to see a Bloodthirster in these pages. I always like seeing these. These are one of my favorite type of conversions, is seeing the illustration it's based on and then the conversion itself. And this one's interesting because he didn't opt to have the head facing in the same direction, but he did. Still a nice job. And there's some really nice deliberate, like this is the sort of paint job that does hold up, I think. You know, the sculpt underneath shows the differences between old miniatures and modern miniatures, which is that there's not the same amount of sharp lines and sharp details. Like if you look at that chain is very clearly, and it might be hard for you guys to see this, but the chain is very clearly made up of sausages of putty by a artist hand sculpting it out of putty and then it being cast. Whereas today that would be razor sharp edges done by a computer. But yeah, still a lovely paint job. Still a lovely, lovely paint job. The game, the movie says yes, much less bush nowadays. Little Olaf says, wasn't the open category always a tad crazy back in the day? Yeah, are we looking at the open category? I remember the open category being crazy. Oh, this is a diorama category. I love this stuff, guys. Let's get into this. This is somebody who's done the Emperor here. This is a very early take on Custodes and the Golden Throne. Look at that. It's hard to even tell what's going on in there, but the guy's done this stuff here is like wisps of sort of steam or like a mist, I guess, like a coolant mist or something that's wafting out from around the Emperor. And he's done a decently convincing marble pattern around him. This certainly lacks some of the grandeur of some of it. This is so awkward. This is classic. Look at this. This guy's trying to read a piece of paper and he's got a power fist. So he's grabbing it like it's like that meme with it's like that's funny. I like this, the Lord of Change with the butterfly wings. That's pretty cool. That's very cool. And I really like this one. This might have inspired some of the recent Speed Freaks box set. These guys going to war as they drive over the hill. And yeah, I think that's really cool. This is interesting because this is Digga. This is a human that's painted green for some reason. But that's neither here nor there. Neither here nor there. Squig says, wow, 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 that hand fan move was a bit too low for the camera. Oh, you must not be watching live. That was a long time ago, dude. Did it look like, Anyways. I like this style of painting. This is how I used to paint as a kid. Just over a black undercoat. Just block in the colors. Good enough. Woo! We have an orc stompa, guys. Look at that. Just crusted with detail. I don't think anything here is actually from a Games Workshop kit. Wow, look at the scale. That's actually much bigger than I thought it was. Look at those stairs down there. That's a flight of stairs. How big is that thing? I will say, it does seem to actually be superimposed onto this landscape here. There's no shadow. I don't think it's actually there. This is before the days of easily photoshopping in. Strange. But that's really cool. That's really, really cool. I think they've done a really nice job with that. I don't like every Stampa that I see, just for the record. This one has something about it that reminds me of the Jawa's Sandcrawler in a really good way. I think this little access staircase down here is something that makes me very happy. And something about this just communicates the sense of scale that I feel is appropriate for something like this model. It's really nicely done. Really nicely done. Firepower, Epic 40K. Okay, so that's an Epic model. No wonder the stairs are so small. Gareth Hamilton, Tournament Junkie. Oh, geez. Look at this. This is a case study in the difficulties of painting female faces on tiny miniatures. No offense to Gareth Hamilton. Kaiser says those cow catcher things at the bottom of the Stompa are from the old Rhino kit, if that helps with scale. Right. Yeah, and I think in addition to that, it's also a model for Epic 40K. So it's the implied scale, I think, is just almost unfathomable, which is why the stairs do so much work as suggesting the implied scale, which is a really good tip for those of you who are making things. Sometimes just a few little details, whether it's a helmet here, a skull here, whatever it is, things that draw your brain into that scale can do so much work for you. Because your mind needs a sense of reference before it clicks and starts interpreting things as big or small. So give your mind those reference points, and that'll do a lot of work for you. Here's some Praetorians. We were talking about Praetorians before. A little rattling sniper, isn't that fun? For those of you who aren't from England or like English Canada, like I am, who haven't enjoyed delving into British history, this sort of helmet is called a pith helmet, and I guess it's traditionally shown for Victorian era guys in hotter climates, because pith, like when you peel an orange, the pith, that white substance there, the bitter stuff between a peel and the fruit of an orange. I guess these are made from the pith of a type of tree, so it's like a light corky material that's spongy and really lightweight, and keeps these silly pale English guys cool in the hot climates. So I like a good pith helmet. Rattling with Yarick's hat. Hey, good eye. That is Commissar Yarick's hat. Nailed it. Javier Lambrecht says it's a great Gargant at 40K scale. It's part of a diorama against Talon Guard. Oh, very cool. Very cool. So you're familiar with the diorama. Where is it? At Warhammer World or something? Or is it in another White Dwarf they show it? Paul Little says, nah, it's 28 millimeters. I don't know, dude. It says Epic right there. It says Firepower Epic 40K. You sure? Well, you could be right. Oh yeah, I don't know why they've used it for an Epic ad. Yeah, I mean, I'm reading your comments out of order. You've kind of covered everything. You're the one who seems to know, so I won't dispute you on that. But it's still cool anyways. Oh, that's from Battle for Big Tooth River. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. My camera is doing face recognition on that Wayne England skull. That's fun. That's an old one. Can't even find pictures anymore. Battle for Big Tooth River? You totally can still find pictures of Battle for Big Tooth River. I know because I found some earlier this week because I was talking to Bill from Bill Making Things. Yeah, Bill Making Things. I got it right this time, didn't I? Yes, Bill Making Things. I got it from Bill Making Things. I found the pictures for Bill Making Things earlier this week. Here we go. Guys, this is an orc fort near and dear to my heart. This is, I played orcs at the beginning of 6th edition. My brother and I split the box set. And this fort was widely featured. And then, and now, I have issues with this orc fort. And let me walk you through those issues. First of all, it pained my little heart at the time to see how many of these wheels that they used on here. You know, maybe if you work at Games Workshop, wheels are dime a dozen. You can just reach into a bin and grab wheels. But for the rest of us, wheels were premium. Wheels were at a premium. Like, it's easy to kit bash together an orky-looking chariot out of sticks, but the wheels are not so easy to do. I made some really ugly wheels using quarters and putty in my day. But anyways, that hurt my feelings. But also, things like this. This is something I have an issue with. This is clearly a popsicle stick or a piece of shim or something like that. And I'm trying to think about the actual construction process that went into this, because this is just how my brain works. This is a planed cut piece of lumber, jaggedly broken off at the end, and then held in place with 4 massive, massive bolts. This skull is a planed, very large planed sheet of lumber. So we're talking a redwood-sized diameter tree, because this is the size of a single orc. Planed and cut into a very nice piece of lumber, and then bolted in 4 points. I'm not buying it, guys. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that that's how these guys, that's how orcs would construct a fort. I'm not buying that they would make a lumber mouth like this. So other than that, I like the aesthetic of this fort. I like the colors of it. I like the warm gradients of dry brushing they've done. But this is me. It's Bill Making stuff. Oh, for fuck's sake. Sorry guys, I didn't mean to curse. I don't like to curse, but I love Bill Making stuff. He's a cool guy. He's very creative. He's very talented. I love his channel. He's my friend. I can't for the life of me get the name of his channel right. Every time I say it, it rolls off my tongue wrong, and now I don't even know which one's right and which one's wrong when I stop to think about it. And it's the bane of my existence. Go follow Bill Making stuff. He's awesome. He's cool. If he shows up in the chat, I'm going to ban him, but that's not personal. Yeah, sorry, that's what that's all about. But yeah, back to nitpicking this guy's beautiful fort. This is the kind of thing I try to avoid when I build, because my nitpicking little brain makes all these little complaints, and it just won't shut up. This is better over here. You see this thin gauge lumber? I can picture them using pieces of lumber like that, no problem. This, too thick, too big. I understand they probably made this on a deadline, and they didn't just blow out their deadlines like I do all the time. Enough said. Enough said. You guys know my feelings about that. It's still a great diorama. I like the idea of the orcs being defenders in a siege. Very cool. I like even this semi-repaired Imperial piece. That's nice. This, I love, love, love this. This is showing. Ooh, this is a guy we didn't mention when we were having the Mount Rushmore chat. It's Nigel Stillman, the originator of Stillmania, and GW Terrain Wizard, scratch building wizard, who's he's a great guy to look into if you're into sort of this nostalgic era and you like building your own terrain. Nigel Stillman is one of the greats for those particular niches of interest. And here you can see a work in progress of a Bretonian castle he's building. And it looks to me like this piece on the right is, what does it say? Plastic piping, a cardboard tube, and polystyrene packaging make up the towers. So I don't know what this piece is on the right, but it looks remarkably unchanged. And then he's using lumber, like that's just like a piece of 2x4. That's very clearly a Pringles can. And he's got a nice little gatehouse coming together here. I'd love to see what that looks like finished. I think I've seen it before, but I don't really remember. But this stuff is great as well. The old high elf architecture. This is a really, really cool visual identity, I think, that they have here. And yeah, this is probably XPS foam, just cut with a stencil, nicely done. But these details on the windows here and on the roof, this is very difficult stuff to do to make it look this clean and this nice. So kudos to whoever built that, because that's a very beautiful piece. They've reclaimed the lumber from Umans, but you're right. You're out of line, but you're right. Am I out of line? Yeah, I mean, I'm just giving you guys the honest thoughts. Just the unfiltered internal monologue, guys. And, you know, I don't like to be critical, but I do think there's something to learn from that. And I like, you know, some of you guys tuned in for the terrain tips, so I'd be amiss if I didn't say what I thought of it. And, you know, I'm sure... I'd be remiss? I don't know, guys. I'm running on very few hours of sleep today. Ooh, one Beast Lord in a stockade. This is, I believe, Paul Sawyer. This is Fat Bloke's Beastman, I think he's making something here for. And this is a pretty cool piece. This reminds me sort of some of you, is there anyone in the UK still in the chat, or have I gone too late and you guys have all gone to bed? But they have these sort of mounds in the UK, right? Henges? This isn't a henge. I don't know. But I like what he's doing here, is the point. I like what he's doing here. Just sort of a raised platform, has a very sort of almost Stone Age vibe that I think fits the Beastmen, if anything does, in terms of architecture. And, well, maybe this isn't Fat Bloke's Beastmen. I do love these classic Beastmen, though. But yeah, you can see they've built a little bit of a henge here, and then have this... I don't know if this is supposed to look like basil hawk or something, but this is a very interesting take on a fortification to give a unique Beastmen look. And I really like when somebody does that, when they go outside of the box to think about what architectural style would fit with an army that doesn't clearly have an architectural style. Like Beastmen have these waystones, or these, what do they call them? Herdstones. Like these individual menhirs, or, you know, maybe a dolmen or something. Like just, that's kind of as far as it goes for Beastmen architecture. So to think of how this could fit into the Warhammer Siege and to come up with this sort of megalithic basalt ring with sort of like earthworks, like clay earthworks built up in there or something. I think this is very creative, and I think it's very cool. And I quite like this, actually. I'm going to make a note of this. Yeah, see, ooh, we're still in the siege. And here's Lustrian walls. I like this. I like this a lot. I'm actually interested in seeing what this guy is doing to cover. This is corrugated cardboard he's using. And what is he using to cover the edges of the cardboard? Let me just skim through this. A strip of masking tape. Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's just masking tape. So it's masking tape, and then what does he cover that all in? This is the glue and sand technique, I think. Polytex. Where does it say this Polytex? Sorry guys, I'm sort of reading real time here because I'm actually curious how he did this. Covering the edges of things can be more work than you think sometimes. But this is like, look at this guys. This is very classic old GW. Is the wall sort of has this coarse sand glued to it that looks like stucco maybe, but I think you need to go finer if you want to texture walls, in my opinion. Like I would use a powdered grout or something like that. A mott. People are calling it motts. Motts. UK here. Yep, UK present. Thanks, guys. I forgot I asked the question. Mott and Bailey. Mott. Forts or motts. Paul Little says, I just laughed out loud remembering fact Bloke's Beastman. Mott, Stockade, a Tor. Maybe a Tor. I was actually thinking of specifically a specific Dark Ages site that's like a mound. Maybe not Dark Ages, maybe even earlier, maybe it's Neolithic. I was thinking of a specific mound. Oh, you know, someone gave me $5 and I didn't notice. Sorry about that. Who was it? Has it come through? Did I just freeze? Morgan Hare. Hi, Eric. Hope you're having a great day. Glad I could make it to the stream. Thanks very much, Morgan. I really appreciate that. That's always nice. That brightens my day to get a super chat. Thanks very much, Morgan. I am having a good day now. Thanks to you. Bon mott. Yeah, so my understanding is motts are... Mott is the hill. But that's not specifically what I was talking about. As I was saying like a Dark Ages sort of mound. There's one specific one. I can't remember where it is, so I'm not even going to try to... the Cahokia Mounds in Illinois. No, those are interesting, but I'm thinking of something specific in the UK. Like the Cahokia Mounds in Illinois, I think those are... Grimdark Roast asked, what issue is this? This is issue 225 from 1998. Iron Age hill forts, stepped hill forts. I could be thinking of that. I could be thinking of that. Maiden Castle. I appreciate you guys helping me. None of these is clicking. Like there's a specific. It's like a proper noun and then a mound or something is the one that I'm specifically talking about, and it's like kind of puzzling to archaeologists. Like it seems to have been built over many, many years. But all of these things are very close to the idea that I'm getting at. So an Iron Age hill fort is exactly the right sort of vibe that I think would work for Beastmen. Barrow, thanks for throwing out the term. Barrow is a funerary thing, and I don't think they ever found any bodies in this particular mound that I'm talking about, and that's one of the reasons it's puzzling to archaeologists. I'm starting to stumble over my words, guys. But yeah. A castle, no. A barrow is a tomb, yes indeed. Here, guys, this is you know, I don't want to dwell on negativity. But I do want to point out that I think this texture is too coarse for this project. I think this is a beautiful shape and piece of architecture for the Lizardmen Fort. I really like the color palette. I like how there's some creeping bits of greenery. I like the glyphs. I like this style of crenellations for the Lizardmen. All of those things are 10 out of 10 for me. So why did I say my criticism first? I don't know why. Just a jerk, I guess. But I think this texture is too coarse. But I like this. I like this a lot. This also illustrates a problem that I grapple with quite a lot when I'm crafting, is the transition between the base that your terrain is on and the battlefield. This here is a particularly thick and sort of jarring one. And it's interesting because they've custom built these modular river pieces. If I'll move it so you guys can see, they've custom built the modular river pieces so they go around the fortress perfectly to make a moat. But I think that it's difficult because you have to compromise. You have to compromise, especially with a river, because a river is, unless there's a levee, it should be below grade. And then so you have to build up on your banks whatever grade you're going to keep your river in, and then you either need to transition it gradually, which takes a lot of horizontal space, or you need to find a way to transition it vertically that doesn't look jarring, and there's no great solution to it. So this is one of those tragic compromises that we need to make as Wargames Terrains makers, that there's not any great one solution to. And yeah, it's the trade-off between modularity and having, obviously the best solution to making it realistic would be to build it into a board. But then that comes with storage issues, that comes with a fixed layout, that comes with all kinds of other problems. Life is about trade-offs, guys. Life is about trade-offs. The big gaps in the modular moat. Yeah, that's talking about something like right here, where all the water would sink into a subterranean chamber. That's another issue. Certainly it is. Certainly it is. Grimdark Roast says henge. Morgan Harris says sarcophagus. No, it's not these things. Silbury Hill. Oh my gosh, there it is. You guys nailed it. Silbury Hill is the one I was looking for. Thank you, Richard Price, Nelson Hickman, and Kaiser. Silbury Hill. I'm thinking of the big hill just outside Aberbury, and I can't remember what it's called either. You nailed it. I was thinking of Silbury Hill. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Thank you. I can sleep tonight knowing that my chat has come through with me with the exact mound that I was thinking of. Thank you very much. That's very satisfying. Let's keep it going though, guys. Oh yeah. Okay. Also, guys, this. I'm going to show you these giant green lily pads made out of bottle caps. You know, I was taught that if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything at all. So let's move on. You know what I will say? I do have something nice to say. I like these frogs. Isn't that frogs? Oh no, those are skinks nestled in amongst the reeds here. I like that. I like that. But you know, I will just say, it is probably my #1 pet peeve when you can really clearly, easily pick out a real-life object in the terrain. And this is one of the more prominent examples of that I've ever seen. So this, to me, is not something I would replicate personally. But it's a matter of opinion, right? Moving on. Overall, this is a great piece of Lizardman terrain, and I dig it. I also, while we're at it, I really like this land. It's painted like sort of a poisonous tree frog, and I really like that. Moving on, moving on. You guys. Schizopantheus says, this is likely to end up uploaded onto the channel, or is it only live? Well, it's live, but it will be uploaded to my Patreon page if you wanna see it, if you wanna rewatch it. So I'll put it on unlisted and put it over on my Patreon page. You know, unlisted, I suppose if one of my Patreons sent you the link, you'd be able to watch it, but I mean, I don't even know why I said that out loud live. What is wrong with me? Don't do that to me, guys. I love this Gorkamorka fort. I love this one. This, you can see this actually influenced my my desert fort. I didn't actually look at this before I built my desert fort, but I think this was embedded in my brain at some deep and primal level. Like, this actually has a lot of sort of garbage piled along the outside, and I think these rivets are a little bit too coarse for my tastes, and it looks like there's less of a rhyme or reason than I would like. And the bulkhead, the transition between the bulkhead, I'm starting to become just a critic here, guys. I need to reset, but I'm just walking you through my mindset here and how I take this in visually. Just from a practical perspective, I'm also sometimes trying to, like, obviously the rule of cool is paramount. If it looks good, do it, and that's great. But I also sometimes try to preempt the people who would come in and go, well, actually, in a real siege, your enemy would be halfway up the wall if they just decided to climb this thing like a ladder. Because they're right, that's true. And anyone garrisoning something like this who is worth his salt would clear the debris away from the wall. Because you don't want to give your enemy cover, you don't want to give them a ramp that you can walk up, you don't want to, like, maybe you want to make some other, or you know, maybe what they've done is there was debris around the fort that was providing the enemy with little pieces of cover, and they've piled it up close to the wall because that's the best they can do, and it gives them a killing field. I don't know. Going into a spiral of overthinking, but I really like this era of Gorkamorka terrain. I think it's just great, filled with details, little shanty structures with something going on in there, whether it's a crate or some pieces. This tank is just gorgeous, fuel tank or something. Beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. Ooh, look at this spicy Escher lady. Looking good. That is a cool illustration. I like it. Looks like, ooh, that is Xenos tech, if I'm not mistaken. Careful. Careful. Careful who you show that to. Here we have Cry Havoc, or Raid on the Villa da Vincia by Jervis Johnson. This is interesting. I'm not sure what software they're using here for this campaign map, but it looks interesting. But yeah, you can see we have Miragliano, Trantio. This is fictionalized Italy that this takes place in. I guess we're getting into Dogs of War. It's been so long we've been flipping through this magazine, I almost forgot we were watching Dogs of War. First we have Beastlord Gatrog's Coven. I was thinking about this the other day, guys. Is there any one particular thing that is more prototypically retro than red horns with a gradient? I'll show you what I'm talking about here. These red horns. Is there anything else that you can do to a model that will mark it as retro as quickly and distinctively as red horns with a gradient? I don't think there is. Like, look at that. Look at that banner pole. That is as retro as it gets. Red horns with a gradient. Very cool. Let me catch up on the chat a little bit. The hype for Gorkamorka, I don't know. I can't speak to, I've never actually played Gorkamorka, if I'm honest, but maybe you guys have figured out by now, the aesthetic draws me to the game more than gameplay does. And I'll enjoy a game if the table looks good, 9 times out of 10. That's just how my brain works. That's my preference. So I can't speak to how good the rules are, but I think the idea of orcs ripping around on the wasteland on a really cool looking table full of scrap structures and desert terrain, I'm in. Paul Little says, fat frog held up by 4 tiny shoulder joints. I'm getting flashbacks like Fortunate Son playing in the background of trying to glue that old metal slan to his palanquin as a kid. I have a brother who's 4 years younger than me, and when we were young, we used to do Warhammer together, and he played Lizardmen, and I remember trying to assemble the slan for him, and I can't remember if it was me or him, but there were some tabs that go into the slaughter base for the way it works is the slan is carried on a palanquin by 4 temple guard who are the elite Saurus who have a dinosaur skeleton mask, and they're each of them like pallbearers. There's 2 on each side holding poles. You can see it on the previous page here. You can see this. This is the model right here. This is how it's built out of the box. So each of these 2 guys, there's a piece that has 2 arms on it holding a pole, and so you're supposed to glue them to that pole, and then put those guys on the base, and then glue this huge nugget of metal onto the top of that pole on the top. And like that, the amount of aggravation from trying to glue that thing, just really bad. So as much as I love old metal models, sometimes you have to appreciate how easy plastics are to deal with sometimes. But yeah, I think my younger brother ended up with a solution for it. In recent years, he actually just added some extra pieces that go across, and it works really well. He's a wizard at gluing and assembling things. So. Hey, speak of the devils, we have the Perry brothers with their Dogs of War army. I knew these guys were into this sort of stuff. We have Alan Perry, facial recognitionized, and Michael Perry. And here's their Dogs of War army. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. This is a cool thing. The Dogs of War have a paymaster who carries a treasure chest into battle, because they're of no certain loyalties. They only fight for pay. They're mercenaries at heart, so that's fun. Paul Little says, supposedly we're getting ash waste vehicles for Necromunda at some point. Ooh, I'll be all over that. I love that. Hartman's Grad says, I think Gorka Morka is embedded in a lot of people's brains. Yeah, I mean, I could take it or leave it. I don't need to play with the orcs. I'm happy to play Ash Waste Necromunda. I just think that's a really cool aesthetic. The Mad Max sort of, the post-apocalyptic. That's a product name if I've ever heard one. Post-apocalyptic. That's beautiful. Nobody steal that. But the post-apocalyptic desert world, where it's sort of a toxic ash desert, there's just a lot of opportunity for narrative there, and I think it's really cool. You have mutated creatures, giant sandworms. You can have dust storms. You can have subterranean caverns with all manner of adventures in there. You can have warring factions of different mutants and feral people with improvised vehicles. It's good stuff. Punk band name, yeah, Post-Apocalyptic is a good punk band name. It's actually really good. I might have to start a punk band just to use it. Whatever else is, you might like Gaslands if you like that style. The only thing about Gaslands, I don't think there's humans in it, right? It's all just Hot Wheels cars. That's kind of cool, but I do like humans. I do like humans. That's all I can say about that. Escher gang name. Yeah, I should call my Escher gang. I think right now they're the Toxic Dolls, the Tox Dolls or something. Painted them up for my wife. She never played me. Just saying. If you're watching right now, wife, I remember that one. You told me you were going to play. I love you. But yeah, maybe if I change the name to Post-Apocalyptic, my wife will play with me. Ooh, look at this beautiful battlefield, guys. This is hey, look at this. This is so cool. That is, if I'm not mistaken, a vineyard. You guys ever seen a vineyard on a table that's not like a World War II table? That's awesome. That's really awesome. It's really fun, and I bet you could fit models in between there too, like some skirmishers. That's really cool. That's really cool. That looks like it's just some kitchen scrubber, maybe with some moss glued to it, but maybe not even that. That's probably like an afternoon project right there if you wanted to build something like that. And what do you guys think of this? I'm curious. Wargaming style hills. Perfectly playable. Very, very unrealistic. Matches the table. Adds a little bit of height. What are your guys' thoughts? What are your guys' thoughts? Do you prefer a hill with a more realistic gradual slope that might tip over the models? Or do you prefer this style of hill? I'm genuinely curious what you guys think. I think in the playability versus realism battle, I tend to come out usually on the side closer, more on realism. Obviously, playability it's key. Otherwise, you might as well just build a diorama. But I'm curious what you guys think about that. Jay says Vineyard tutorial when? I thought your name was Jay Vineyard. I was like, that's a coincidence. Yeah, maybe. Hartmansgrad says there are better compromises between playable and good looking. I think you're right. I mean, this in particular is a pretty high Sugarloaf hill. You know what I always thought would be the solution is to have a gradual sloped hill, but to have some wedge-shaped pieces. So if the slope of the hill is here, and you have a regiment of guys that's not gonna sit flat and will just fall, then to have a wedge-shaped piece that will adjust the slope of the terrain as they move across it. And I think there's something there. I don't know why I've never really done that. And the same thing for stairs. You know, I think it's a tendency of people when they're building stairs in a wargaming context to make each stair big enough to accommodate a model, and you get these long, weird staircases that's more like a fish ladder or something, and sometimes the height between them, the tread, is all messed up, and it doesn't end up looking like a staircase. I really don't like that. I think you're better off building a negative staircase piece. So here's what I'm talking about, guys. I'll sketch it out for you. You could build salmon ladder stairs like this on your terrain and have your miniature, you know, happily standing on there. Or you could build normal stairs and then a negative stair piece, something that looks like this, and put that in when you want a miniature to stand on the stairs. What do you think? Now, am I a genius or am I a genius? Hey? Artist Poet says poster tack was my solution, and that's a really good solution actually. Then you don't even need a negative stair piece. That's a really good solution, especially for plastic models. That would look great. People are saying totally functional, but the absolutely not playable slopes could need a bit more visual interest. Yeah, that's a fair position. Like why not? I guess there's a difference in playability in Warhammer Fantasy Rules between if this were done up like a rocky cliff, people would know it's a cliff and that's impassable. Whereas if it's like this, it's supposed to be just a hill and you would just move from there to there. And I guess, but even this provides some issues where realistically you can't put, there's several inches of dead zone here that you can't maneuver into just because of you can't put the model there. So even this creates some issues, so it's not like it's totally playable. Yeah. Hartmansgrad said, I found a nice MDF stairs where the base slips into a gap between the steps. I've seen those. I still feel like the tread is a bit high. That's usually like, I don't know, a model would be 4 stairs high or 5 stairs high. It should be more like 6 or 8. Like stand in front of a staircase next time, guys. Like what stair are you looking at? Are you looking at the 4th stair, like directly in front of you? Are you looking at the 4th stair, or are you looking at the 10th stair? You know? And obviously there's a little bit of leeway there. Models are on bases, their proportions aren't exactly the same, but something to think about. Nikita L says, I believe RP Archive did something about realistic hills. He did, and they're gorgeous. He has a lot of really, really cool ideas, and I've never actually used any of them because all of his stuff is sort of in a self-contained system, which is in of itself extremely, extremely impressive. But if you guys haven't watched his hill video in particular, it's really, really cool because he came up with a really interesting solution. But that said, that solution is, I think, for role-playing games more specifically where models are individual. I'm thinking about a Warhammer Fantasy game where you have like a square like this big of models, and some of them are made out of pewter. Maybe all of them are made out of pewter. And so his hills would be too steep for that, but his system is really cool, and those hills were really amazing. Like that was a real that might be my favorite video of his, to be honest. Like that I've seen. It's very, very clever stuff. Just the way that the shapes work together. Go check it out, guys, if you haven't seen it. Mark Vezin says, not bad, can even build some articulated cane under the base. I'm not sure what you mean, Mark. Historic Life says, back when the old hot wire cutters were small and used 2 D-cell batteries. I remember that. I had one of those. It's like a big handle with a loop. That was my first hot wire cutter back in the day. Baphomet's Vomit Comet said, I like more naturalistic hills for that kind of elevation. I prefer rocks, boulders. Fair enough. Yeah, I agree. GW used to sell playable hills. I remember those. Those were actually not bad. And they matched the battle mat, which I think is the best part about them. Artist poet. Who dis? You asking me on my channel, who this? No, who are you? Welcome to the stream. Magnets were good. Add a piece of tin on the base and the stairs and add a magnet to make the mini stand on the stairs. Bingo. Yeah, I mean, I guess if everything's magnetized, that works. But sometimes magnets can cause a little trouble, actually, too. Paul Little says, you don't want 30 pewter models sliding downhill on their movement tray. That is definitely true and definitely a real thing for those of the old Warhammer Fantasy players. That was a real threat. That happened, and it happened all the time. Well, this is a cool battle report, but I don't have too much to say about this stuff. I've already sort of drooled over these armies and various other pictures, so let's cruise on through. Look at that. Looks like a nice show of sportsmanship at the end of the game. That's always nice. Nice to peer into the background and see what's going on terrain-wise. And we're at the end of the issue, where we've got bits for sale. I like this section because, yeah, see, this section also shows who did the sculpting on each model, which I really enjoy. So this guy, actually, Norman Swales, he's worth mentioning as well. You can see Bronzino's Galloper gun, designed by Michael Perry, Alan Perry, and Norman Swales. As we talked about already, the Perry brothers are the guys who do these humanoids, but Norman Swales designed most of the old war machines, cannons and, you know, repeater guns and Galloper guns. So I'm not sure what his background is or what his specialty is, but he did a lot of the old war machines. So shout out to Norman Swales. Hartzman Grad says, God, those prices. Yeah, well, you know, these aren't like cheap. Like, this is 20 years ago, and this is 35 bucks for a box of 10 models, right? Like, that's not so crazy compared to now, realistically. I mean, when you buy a box of intercessors, 10 intercessors, how much is that? $50? Anyways, I don't want to get into a whole thing about GW pricing, but these were always pricey. from my perspective. And you know, I think the big difference is that characters now, characters seem to have become more expensive across the board. Characters are always like, if you buy an individual character model from GW, it's always like 35 bucks. I just said, like, you guys might notice I have a pattern of doing this where I say I'm not going to do something and then I do it immediately after. You're watching the war for my soul in real time play out between the good side of me and the evil side of me. Guess who wins most of the time? Well, that's neither here nor there. Okay, 40 bucks for a dragon. I'll admit that is pretty exciting. That's pretty cool. Ooh, but that's what I really want. That's what I really want. If I could have anything from this whole magazine, it's this bad boy right here. If you guys remember, I think somebody said in the chat earlier, who's behind the horses design? That's a good question. I don't actually know who originally designed those horses. That's a really good question. If anybody knows, let me know in the chat. Nelson Hickman, according to Google, that $35 would be $58 now. See, there you go. That's pretty on par with what James Workshop's... James. Oh, James. But yeah, I assume you used an inflation calculator or something. Paul Little, yeah, interesting. The Marksman and Raglan only have 6 in the box. I actually have that box right here. 6 of them. And yeah, I am going to have to track down those unique sculpts one at a time with some careful eBay hunting. Please don't bid against me, guys. I have a fort in a box in the next room, says Minute On. Bought it secondhand for €100. Smiley face emoji. I'm jealous, dude. I'm jealous. That is pretty cool. This fortress is honestly probably the strongest reason why I haven't built a castle on the channel yet, is because I'm still hoping one of these will just fall into my lap one day. But I should build a castle, don't you think? I've got Bretonians. Yep, building a castle. We're doing it. Writing over here in caps, castle. Glyph plates, very cool. Hey, do you guys remember Troll? There was a number that you would call if you had rules disputes. 1-800-TROLL-1 or 1-800-TROLL. And I used to call this with my brothers. Because we would get in screaming matches at each other about the rules. And you think, oh my god, what brats you must have been to get into fights about war games, about a game, so a couple things. First of all, we fought about everything, so it was just a proxy battleground, so to speak. But also, have you ever played a game of Warhammer Fantasy, 2,000 point game, when you're a child and neither side knows the rules very well? It takes 8 hours minimum. It takes 8 hours minimum, and no matter how well-intentioned you are at the beginning and how sportsmanlike and charitable you intend to be at the beginning, on hour 4, when you're a half hour deep in your opponent's turn and he's looking up the 7th thing in the rulebook and your blood sugar is dropped and your back hurts from bending over because you're not playing on a table, you're playing on the ground because you're a child and you are unfamiliar with ergonomics, well then your mood turns and there's nothing you can do about it and you just find yourself snapping. You find yourself short and angry, and so this is actually a nugget of wisdom that I would pass on to you guys for your war games regardless, is first of all, you know, I think sportsmanship's important, but you guys are all adults, I'm not going to give you any chats about sportsmanship, but blood sugar management is underrated. Bring snacks to your war game. You know, don't be eating Cheetos and handling your opponent's models, but bring like some orange slices or something and wash your hands but keep your blood sugar at a level where you can keep in a good mood. Because I know not everybody's like this, but when I get hungry, my mood turns like this, and I become a real jerk. And I know I'm not the only one out there because I've dealt with some of you guys. Um, manage your blood sugar. Manage your blood sugar, and you'll have more fun wargaming. You'll have more fun wargaming. What can I say? And that brings us to the end of the magazine, guys. That brings us to the end. And I've been streaming now for over 3 hours, so I think I'm going to wrap things up. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys continuing to support and tune in and hang out with me. It's a lot of fun, and yeah, let me know if you enjoyed this sort of thing. Just in the chat before we hang out, if you enjoyed going through the White Dwarfs instead of doing some hobby stuff, then maybe we can make this a regular segment, and maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll do one hobby one per week and one sort of looking at rule books and looking at stuff like this. I don't know. I also got, I might as well just show you guys before we sign off here. I also got these, I got these old D&D magazines recently that are worth looking into at some point too. These have nowhere near the same level of nostalgia for me or familiarity as the White Dwarfs. I didn't grow up playing Dungeons and Dragons like I did playing Warhammer. But it'd still be fun to go through some of that stuff with you guys. So let me know if that's interesting to you. I'm going to continue to stream Thursday afternoons, but I think I'm going to add another regular schedule too in the at some point. Maybe in the morning one of these days or something like that, because I have some flexibility with my schedule. Yeah, because I want to really get across a bunch of different time zones and people with different careers being able to tune in. Because this is really fun for me, guys, and I enjoy interacting with you guys in real time, and it's a lot of fun. So, yeah, my email is ericshobbyworkshop@gmail.com. All one word, no punctuation, no spaces, no underscores, nothing. ericshobbyworkshop@gmail.com. Or you can send me a message on Instagram @ericshobbyworkshop. And yeah, thanks again for tuning in, guys. And we'll see you next time on Eric's Hobby Workshop.